Chapter 23:19. However, Chu Li's speed was extremely fast. Even if she could reverse time, she could only control it for 100 feet. If she wanted to catch up to Chu Li step by step, Chu Li would have escaped to God knows where. However, she was unwilling to let him go just like that. Her jade face was solemn. After a moment, she raised her hands as if she was worshipping the heavens. Then, a ray of light shone down from the sky and split into two and landed on her palms, turning into two balls of white light. She held the two balls of white light and slowly put her palms together. The two white lights fused together and suddenly, a strange change occurred. The two balls of white light turned into a ball of red light. Then, she gently pushed it. The red light spilled out and formed a long rainbow that traveled 100 meters away. She floated and walked on the red light. The red light was illusory, but when she stepped on it, it was as if it was real. She kept moving forward and the red light kept extending until she reached the outskirts of the city and entered the extraterritorial battlefield. She plucked two balls of white light from the sky again and turned them into red light. She followed the red light and chased after it for 100 miles. Then, she saw the stone tower. The red light was blocked by the stone tower and could not move forward anymore. She stopped in front of the stone tower and frowned as she pondered. With a thought, her feet trembled slightly, shaking the stone tower. Suddenly, the stone tower burst with a hazy gray light. The shaking ground stopped and suppressed Sui Miaozhu's control of the earth. Sui Miaozhu frowned and stared at the stone tower for a while, trying to see through its wonders. She could clearly feel the strange power attached to the stone tower. It made her quite afraid and she did not dare to approach it. She maintained a sufficient distance and controlled the surrounding power to destroy it. She tried to use spiritual energy to suppress it, but it was blocked by the invisible power of the stone tower. In the end, she could only use the stupid method. She walked to a nearby place and kicked a boulder as if it was a huge paper shell. The boulder was as tall and wide as a person. After it flew up, it drew a half arc in the air and crashed into the stone tower. Boom! The stone tower trembled, but it did not shatter. She could feel that the stone tower had deflected the impact of the boulder as if it had come alive. This was the secret of the formation. Even though she had manipulated this space, she still could not see through the secret of the formation. The outside of the stone tower was shrouded in a hazy white light, blocking her from prying. She knew that this was soul force, and it could even harm her soul force. She had to be careful. If there was a powerful soul force within the pagoda, then recklessly approaching it would be the same as committing suicide. She thought for a moment, then lifted her leg and kicked another two boulders. The two boulders crashed into the stone tower at almost the same time. The hazy white light flickered, and the stone tower once again deflected the impact of the two huge rocks. It only trembled twice. Sui Miaozhu did not believe it and kicked out a few more boulders. Finally, the stone tower was destroyed, but there was nothing inside. It was just a stone tower. However, after the stone tower disappeared, she used the previous technique again. The red light continued to form a passage that extended into the distance, and was no longer blocked by the stone tower. Unfortunately, after walking for a mile, the red light was blocked again. Another stone tower blocked the red light, which infuriated Sui Miaozhu. Thus, she used the same method and destroyed the stone tower with brute force. She destroyed one stone tower after another. When she destroyed the 10th tower, she turned around and walked back. Chu Li appeared in Shao Qi's courtyard at Taihao Peak. Shao Qi was in isolated cultivation, so there was no one else in the courtyard. Only Chu Li sat alone at the stone table and pondered with a solemn expression. He did not expect Sui Miaozhu to become the Azura deity king, the first goddess king. Moreover, he did not expect the Azura deity king to reach such a terrifying level. It was truly miraculous. His martial arts was like a child's fight in front of the Azura deity king. He was not a threat at all. However, he noticed a clue. It seemed like he could still threaten Sui Miaozhu. The key was the little beast in his mind, and this little beast was ultimately a spirit beast's power. When all his powers were suppressed by the Azura deity king, only the spirit beast's power could withstand it. If he wanted to resist Sui Miaozhu, the Azura power technique would not work. Although the heavenly demon scripture was powerful, it had its limits. However, the spirit beast's power, which he had never paid attention to, showed its power. He thought of his two spirit beasts. The Azure Dragon and the Dark Origin Tortoise were in isolated cultivation and were working hard to improve themselves. Spirit Beast's isolated cultivation did not only last 1 or 2 months, but at least a year or even 8 to 10 years. He could not borrow the two Spirit Beasts' power now, so he could only wait. Therefore, if he wanted to save his life, he could not fight Sui Miaozhu anymore. Otherwise, he would definitely die. He was not even sure if he could be resurrected if he died in Sui Miaozhu's hands. This time, he was able to escape from Sui Miaozhu thanks to the Chakram Pagoda. This method could only be used once. If Sui Miaozhu was prepared next time, she would definitely catch up to him. While he was deep in thought and was about to descend to 100,000 hills, he suddenly looked up at Taihao Peak Master Wang Shoren, who was gliding toward him. Wang Shoren's azure robe fluttered in the wind as he slowly approached him and sat opposite him. Chu Li gave a fist salute. "Peak Master, I heard that the new Azura deity king has been born," Wang Shoren said. Chu Li sighed and nodded. "Yes," Wang Shoren said, "the birth of a new deity king means that the foreign battlefield has calmed down. It's not that dangerous." Chu Li asked, "Peak Master, is the Azura deity king invincible?" Hee, there's no such thing as invincible in this world." Wang Shoren smiled and shook his head. Chu Li asked, "Can you defeat her, Peak Master?" "No." Wang Shoren said slowly, "The Azura deity king's power is not only from herself, but from the entire Azura realm. A part of the Azura's power is condensed in her body. Then, who in the Grandmaster realm can defeat her?" Chu Li frowned. "Is Song Wuji the only one?" "I don't know about the Azura deity king." Wang Shoren shook his head. "The Azura deity king will not leave the Azura realm. Otherwise, her power will weaken and she will be in danger." "You can't step into the foreign battlefield?" Chu Li asked. Wang Shoren said, "No one will stop you if you want to enter, but your cultivation level will be greatly reduced. If you really encounter a top-notch master, you might die. Therefore, as a safety measure, you rarely enter the foreign battlefield." Chu Li pondered. Wang Shoren said, "Moreover, the Azura deity king has no desires. Killing celestials is not beneficial to her cultivation, so she won't do something so pointless." "Don't worry." Chu Li sighed. "Then there's no way to deal with the Azura deity king?" "As far as I know, there isn't." Wang Shoren shook his head. "The power of this world can hardly hurt the Azura deity king. You need the power of the upper heaven. If you can cultivate the martial arts of the upper heaven to an extremely high level, it'll work." Chu Li asked, "What about Song Wuji? Can he kill the Azura deity king?" "How is that possible?" Wang Shoren laughed and shook his head. "If he could kill the Azura deity king, he would have done it many times over. Even an enlightened master can't kill the Azura deity king." Chu Li asked. Wang Shoren said, "The Azura deity king can also be an enlightened master." Chu Li sighed and nodded slowly. It seemed that Song Wuji was not as strong as he imagined. This gave him a little confidence in dealing with Song Wuji. Wang Shoren said, "Don't worry, as long as you don't take the initiative to look for trouble with the Azura deity king, you'll be fine." Chu Li forced a smile and fell silent. Chapter 23:20. Even if he did not want to look for trouble with the Azura deity king, he had no choice but to do so. The Azura deity king would definitely look for trouble with him and kill him at all costs. Since Song Wuji could not stop the Azura deity king, she would definitely come to the Beyond Heaven's realm to kill him. He was in a desperate situation. If he did not advance, he would retreat. If he retreated, he would die. Wang Shoren could tell he was in a bad mood. You're so worried about this Azura deity king. Have you met her before? After he said that, he laughed. If Chu Li had met the Azura deity king, he would be dead by now. Chu Li sighed. The Azura deity king is the original Northern Reverend Sui Miaozhu. I did meet her and luckily escaped. I might not be able to escape a second time. Sui Miaozhu? Wang Shoren was surprised. He knew about the birth of the Azura deity king through the news from the heaven-shaking tower, but he didn't know who the Azura deity king was. The Azura deity king was the most mysterious of them all. He almost never left the Azura realm, and other people could not enter the Azura realm either. It was even more difficult to know the Azura deity king's background, and no one would go and provoke him. Chu Li said slowly, "It's a blessing for her. After getting rid of the three reverends, she was the only one left. She naturally became the deity king, the first female Azura deity king. Women tend to go to extremes. You have to be careful." Wang Shoren said, "Did you fight her?" Chu Li shook his head. "Not really, I was just escaping." "In that case, you do know some of her background." Wang Shoren's spirit rose, and he hurriedly said, "Tell me, what abilities does she have?" Chu Li sighed. "It's beyond imagination. Everything around her is under her control. The void is sealed, the spiritual energy is confined, and the earth changes at her whim. There's nothing she can't do." He frowned. "Such power, it's no wonder she's called the deity king. I don't know how to break it." Wang Shoren nodded solemnly. "She's the deity king. Chu Li, how did you escape?" "I used the void-breaching pearl." Wang Shoren revealed a trace of a smile. "It seems like the treasure can block it for a while." Chu Li nodded. "Only for a while. I can't hold on for long. She's determined to kill me. I don't know how to survive." Wang Shoren smiled and said, "I'll give you another void-breaching pearl." Chu Li smiled and closed-fist saluted. "Thank you, Peak Leader." Wang Shoren waved his hand and said with a smile, "I don't have many void-breaking pearls. It's better to use them carefully. Unfortunately, it depends on luck, and it is very difficult to obtain them again." Chu Li nodded slowly. "Peak Leader, there's something I don't understand. Tell me about it." Wang Shoren perked up. After listening to Chu Li's words, he had been thinking of ways to restrain the Azura deity king, but he realized that it was very difficult to restrain the Azura deity king. It was as if the Azura deity king had completely broken away from the power of this realm, and could not be suppressed. Only an enlightened master could do it. However, the price of a heavenly god's descent was too great. Chu Li asked, "Why can't I see any spirit-beast martial arts in the Grandmaster's boundary?" "Spirit-beast martial arts are taboo." Wang Shoren said in a deep voice, "Even spirit beasts are taboo." Chu Li raised his eyebrows. "I've seen quite a few spirit beasts. That's on the lower third heaven. We rarely see them on the upper third heaven." Wang Shoren shook his head and sighed. "Spirit beasts form their own world, and they have grudges with the upper third heaven. It's better if we don't get involved." "Why is that?" Chu Li frowned. "Spirit beasts are no less intelligent than humans. Can't we live in peace?" "We want to, but we can't." Wang Shoren shook his head. "This is the will of the upper third heaven. That's why everyone is afraid of you when you ascended. Although there's a problem with your qualifications, it's mainly because of the spirit beast. No one would reveal this problem except for him. Most sects did not know about it and only moved with the wind." Seeing that the 9 divisions and the top first-rate sects treated Chu Li coldly, they treated him coldly. There were too many things that could not be said in the outer heavens realm. It was better to do as they were told. The risk of taking advantage of the situation was too high. It was only because the Rain Master Palace was weak and desperate that they broke this taboo and broke the balance because they were one of the 9 divisions. Otherwise, Chuli would always be outside of the first-rate sections. If that was the case, he would have no future and it would be difficult for him to become a top-notch master. He would slowly be eliminated and drown in the outer heavens realm. Chuli nodded. Wang Shoren said, "The spirit beast heart technique is a taboo in the outer heavens realm. Almost no one cultivates it and it has no value, so it's lost. You're the only one who ascended using the spirit beast heart technique." Chuli asked, "What grievances do the upper third heaven have with the spirit beasts?" "I don't know." Wang Shoren shook his head and sighed. "In short, we have nothing to do with the spirit beast. Ignore them and it's best to stay away from them. Chuli, if you want to live a peaceful life, it's best to do so." Chuli frowned. "Taihao Peak has the spirit beast heart technique, right?" Wang Shoren frowned and looked at him. Chuli smiled. "I'm just curious. If there really is a spirit beast heart technique, I'd like to take a look." Sigh. Wang Shoren shook his head and smiled bitterly. Chuli said, "If Peak Leader feels that it's too difficult, then forget it." "Forget it?" Wang Shoren waved his hand. "If you want to take a look, then take a look. Only you can understand this. Now, no one in the outer heavens realm cultivates the spirit beast heart technique." Chuli gave a fist salute. "Thank you, sect leader." "You're welcome," Wang Shoren said. "Come to think of it, we're not strangers. Let's go to the top floor of the Sutra Library. You'll find what you want there." Chuli nodded. He understood why Wang Shoren was willing to help him. Escaping from the Azura Deity King allowed Wang Shoren to have a deeper understanding of the Azura Deity King, and being able to escape from the Azura Deity King also made Wang Shoren more optimistic about Wang Shoren. Otherwise, Wang Shoren wouldn't have agreed so readily. Chuli pondered as he stood in front of a row of bookshelves on the top floor of the Sutra Library. He had gone through all the books on this row of bookshelves and read all the spirit beast heart technique. The spirit beast heart techniques that Taihao Peak collected were naturally top-notch. They did not care about ordinary spirit beast heart technique. Unfortunately, no one cultivated these spirit beast heart techniques, and it was forbidden to cultivate them. After reading these spirit beast heart techniques, Chuli's understanding of martial arts had improved. He also had a clear understanding of the heart technique that he had created and discovered many areas that could be improved. He realized that when he created this heart technique, he was in a magical state. That was why the heart technique was so meticulous without any major flaws or flaws. That was why he could become an enlightened master and step into the Grandmaster's boundary. If he wanted to continue to improve, he needed to improve on the original heart technique and make it more exquisite. He initially thought that he was a genius who could combine 4 spirit beast heart techniques into one. It was flawless and flawless. However, when he saw this shelf of spirit beast heart techniques, he realized how insignificant he was. He thought that the path that he had taken was unique and unique. In fact, someone had already taken this path and was way ahead of him. Chapter 23-21. He had a unique advantage in cultivating the heavenly spirit scripture, and that was the purple dragon and the profound origin turtle. The cultivation of the heavenly spirit scripture was of the same origin as the spiritual beast mental cultivation method that he had previously cultivated. Most importantly, there was a spiritual beast to assist him. The two complemented each other, allowing him to achieve twice the results with half the effort. It was far better than cultivating on his own. The heavenly spirit scripture was exquisite enough, but it might not be more exquisite than the heavenly demon scripture or the scripture of great light that he cultivated. However, he had that strange little beast in his mind. If he cultivated the heavenly spirit scripture, it would definitely give him a pleasant surprise. He had always been ignorant of the little critter's abilities and didn't know what kind of use it had. This time, in the face of danger, it suddenly opened its eyes and shot out rays of light. It could be said that it had saved his life and displayed its ability to restrain the Azura Deity King's power. Even the Great Light Scripture did not have such a miraculous restraining power, so he decided to cultivate it properly. Perhaps he could only rely on it to escape in the future. More importantly, there must be a reason why the cultivators on the first heaven were afraid of the spiritual beast cultivation technique. This reason was probably due to the unique power of the spiritual beast cultivation technique, so he wanted to cultivate it even more. Moreover, he still had the life and death scripture. At the critical moment, he could hide the mental cultivation method of the spirit beast on the life and death tree. That way, he would be able to get away with it when he reached the upper heaven. Therefore, he could ignore the taboo of the upper heaven against the mental cultivation method of the spirit beast. He turned around and walked out. As soon as he walked out of the scripture pavilion, the disciples of Great Void Peak looked at him curiously. There were not many disciples in Taihao Peak, so everyone was familiar with each other. Chu Li was an unfamiliar face. Chu Li. Lu Yurong's voice rang out from behind him. She was dressed in a light green gown and stood gracefully at the entrance of the sutra depository. There was a sweet smile on her jade-like face, and her entire body exuded an enchanting radiance, causing the surrounding people to stare with their eyes wide open. Chu Li turned around and waved. Lu Yurong walked down the stairs and approached him. She pursed her lips and smiled. You are indeed the son-in-law of Taihao Peak, to be able to enter the sutra library. Only Taihao Peak disciples were allowed to enter the sutra library, and distinguished guests were not allowed in. Since Chu Li was able to make an exception, it was obvious that Taihao Peak treated him well and regarded him as one of their own. This must be because of Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue, and it had nothing to do with him. This made her feel inexplicably sour. Chu Li smiled. My cultivation level has improved by leaps and bounds. It's all right. Lu Yurong nodded. Let's go to my place. Chu Li nodded. The two of them arrived at her courtyard. It was exquisite and elegant. Lu Yurong had already renovated the place and branded it with her unique style. As soon as they stepped in, they knew it was Lu Yurong's courtyard. Lu Yurong brewed some tea with her bare hands and sat at the table, sizing him up. At this moment, Chu Li was faintly discernible. Although he was sitting right in front of her, it felt unreal and unpredictable, which made her a little suspicious. She reached out and touched Chu Li's big hand. The warm feeling gave her a familiar feeling. All of a sudden, Chu Li's surroundings converged as he retracted all of his cultivation. In an instant, he became real and had flesh and blood. Lu Yurong heaved a sigh of relief. Where did you get your cultivation? Chu Li chuckled. Speaking of which, I was forced to do so. My days in the Grandmaster's boundary weren't as leisurely and carefree. He told Lu Yurong about his adventures, and Lu Yurong nodded in agreement. She led a comfortable life in the Empyrean fairy sect, but she was talented, so she had been advancing by leaps and bounds. However, compared to Chu Li's hardships, there was still a lack of tempering, so her advancement was slightly slower. As the two of them chatted, Chu Li completely relaxed. Chu Li's heartstrings had been tense for a while, and he was always in a state of excitement. Whether it was killing or running for his life, he could not calm down for a moment. Now that he was sitting in front of Lu Yurong and chatting, his emotions slowly calmed down and he relaxed. Lu Yurong said, after a while, I want to go to the foreign battlefield to have a look. Chu Li frowned. There's no rush. Lu Yurong said, ever since I came to the Grandmaster's boundary, I've rarely fought. It's too easy, so I need to force myself. I don't want to always be behind you. She was proud and arrogant, so it was not a big deal to be behind Chu Li. The key was that she did not want to fall behind Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue. She had already started late. If she did not work hard, she would fall further behind the two women. When that time came, she would inevitably be short of breath. Chu Li looked at her deeply. Even without using the omniscient mirror, he could see through her thoughts. He frowned. All right. Since the Azura deity king was out, The foreign battlefield's murderous intent was not as strong and returned to normal. It was not as dangerous for Lu Yurong to go there. Lu Yurong smiled sweetly. I'll be careful, Chu Li said. It's fine for you to go to the foreign battlefield. After all, you need to train, but you can't just go around recklessly. Take this route. As he spoke, he took out a silk handkerchief and passed it to Lu Yurong. Lu Yurong took it and opened it. There was a map drawn on it, and the most obvious thing on the map was a red line. She could not help but look up at him. Chu Li said, within this red line you can fight with all you have, but don't go beyond it or it'll be too dangerous. What's going on? Lu Yurong scoffed. There's no safe zone in the foreign battlefield. What you're doing is, you built a wheel tower, right? Chu Li slowly nodded. As expected of Lu Yurong, she could guess it right away. Lu Yurong kept the silk handkerchief and smiled. All right, I'll listen to you. But how many towers have you built in the foreign battlefield? Chu Li thought for a while. Around 100, but we can't be careless. These towers might be destroyed by the Azura deity king. You can take a look when you go, so you know what's going on. Around 100 towers. Lu Yurong smiled. Are you worried about them? Chu Li scoffed. Including you. Lu Yurong pursed her lips and chuckled, rolling her eyes at him. Chu Li asked, You're still cultivating the Empyrean Fairy Heart scripture? Yes. Lu Yurong nodded. With the Empyrean Fairy Heart scripture as the base, I've also cultivated the Vitality scripture, which complements the Empyrean Fairy Heart scripture. It turns out that the Empyrean Fairy Heart scripture isn't too weak, it's too strong, which makes it hard to improve. With the Vitality scripture, it's easier to cultivate the Empyrean Fairy Heart scripture. Chu Li nodded slowly. The two talked about her Vitality scripture, and Chu Li gave Lu Yurong a few pointers. Lu Yurong was enlightened. Chu Li was well versed in martial arts of all realms, and his cultivation was getting deeper, which was a great help to Lu Yurong. Chu Li cultivated in isolation in Lu Yurong's courtyard for 10 days and entered the 6th level of the Heavenly Spirit scripture. His cultivation level was high, and he had a unique understanding of the Spirit Beast Heart technique. Creating the first 3 levels of the Heavenly Spirit scripture might seem like the wisdom of the ancients, but it was the condensation of his deep understanding of the Spirit Beast Heart technique. When he cultivated the Heavenly Spirit scripture, he progressed at a tremendous pace. In the evening, Lu Yurong returned to the courtyard under the sunset glow. She was dressed in a lake green gown and her body was bloody. It was obvious that she had killed many Azuras. She entered the courtyard with a solemn expression and sighed at Chu Li. Have you heard the rumors outside? Chu Li was practicing a fist technique in the courtyard like a soaring dragon. He asked slowly, What rumors? They say that you're a heavenly demon. Lu Yurong scoffed. Chu Li laughed. Someone believes it? Lu Yurong nodded slowly. Many believe it and they want to verify it. Chu Li said, Then let's verify it, lest they become suspicious. Lu Yurong frowned. It's not that simple. If people believe such rumors, what does it mean? She had a deep understanding of people's hearts. There was such an undercurrent in Taihao Peak, and someone wanted to chase Chu Li away. Chapter 23-22. Chu Li said, It's inevitable that they would have such thoughts. He had obtained many things from Taihao Peak. He had obtained 2 void-breaching pearls, which allowed him to enter the top floor of the Sutra Library. More importantly, there was Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue, and now Lu Yurong. Even though there were quite a few female disciples on Great Empyrean Peak, there were only a few who were so exceedingly beautiful, and they could be counted on 2 hands. He occupied 3 of them, and coupled with the fact that he seemed to be very close to Fu Kaiwei, it made the young male disciples even more jealous, wishing for nothing more than to chase him far away. Lu Yurong scoffed. Why don't they think about it? Taihao Peak isn't a charity hall. We've always been fair. If you don't have any special contributions, how can you receive such special treatment? They're all smart people, they're all blinded by greed. You must be obsessed with lust. Chu Li laughed. Lu Yurong gave him a sidelong glance. Aren't you going to fight back? Chu Li smiled. There's no need for that. Is it very serious? Everyone is talking about it. Lu Yurong frowned and said, someone is adding fuel to the fire. It's not just the disciples of Taihao Peak, but also the elders of Taihao Peak. You've become a thorn in everyone's side. Chu Li nodded. Just pretend I didn't hear anything. I don't think the Peak Master will force it. Lu Yurong scoffed. He will definitely let you test your real body again. Do you think you can hide it? She knew that Chu Li had cultivated the heavenly demon scripture. She did not know if the heavenly demon scripture and the heavenly demon power were related or if it would be discovered to be the heavenly demon power. Chu Li smiled. No problem. Even so, we can't let them have their way. Otherwise, they'll push their luck. Lu Yurong frowned. Chu Li said, that's true. Although he was skilled in martial arts, his status was far inferior to his cultivation. He had always been looked down upon by others. When the Celestials looked at him, they would unconsciously have a sense of superiority, as if they were looking at someone from the countryside. Even though his cultivation was astonishing, he could not dispel this sense of superiority. Others would think that his concession was a sign of weakness, and they would push their luck, causing him endless trouble. Lu Yurong looked at him deeply. Do as you see fit, but I'm guessing they won't be able to hold it in any longer. They'll do it in the next few days. Chu Li smiled and seemed to be deep in thought. A young man and a middle-aged man stood in front of Wang Shouren in the sect master's hall. Wang Shouren lazily sat on the armchair and looked at the two of them with a faint smile. The young man's facial features were ordinary, but he had a pair of sword-like eyebrows that were slanted to his temples. He had a compelling sense of sharpness and heroism. He looked at Wang Shouren with his bright eyes. Peak leader, this matter is a little strange. It seems that within a day, it has spread like wildfire. All the disciples know about it and suspect Chu Li. It is indeed strange. Wang Shouren nodded lightly. The middle-aged man was as gentle as jade. He said calmly, this idea is too shocking. That is why it is like this. Wang Shouren smiled and looked at the middle-aged man, Zhou Wenyuan. What do you think, junior brother Zhou? Zhou Wenyuan stood with his hands behind his back and smiled gently. I don't think the Rain Master Hall will be so careless to let the heavenly demons in. The young disciple, Deng Xing, hurriedly said, Martial Uncle Zhou, what if he has a treasure on him, or if his cultivation is high enough to hide from the Rain Master Hall? When Chu Li first entered the Rain Master Hall, he only entered through the White Dew Hall. He was only examined by a hall leader. We know Chu Li's background. Although he came from the lower realm, he is innocent and has nothing to do with the heavenly demonic realm. Zhou Wenyuan pondered and said, but there is no smoke without fire. There must be a reason for an unfounded wind. Wang Shouren said, Junior brother Zhou, you mean that this person is no longer Chu Li, but someone else in disguise? That's not very possible. Zhou Wenyuan shook his head slowly. Deng Xing hurriedly said, there is another possibility. Wang Shouren looked at him. Zhou Wenyuan smiled and shook his head. The young man was still impatient. Deng Xing said, he may have cultivated the heavenly demonic power. The heavenly demonic power is mysterious and unpredictable. It is actually very tempting. Moreover, he can change his appearance. It is said that he has the ability to change his appearance. He heard from others that Chu Li's disguise technique was magical and not inferior to the heavenly demonic power. He remembered it in his heart and had a hint of suspicion. No disguise technique in the world could achieve the effect of the heavenly demonic power. Chu Li's disguise technique was so powerful that it was most likely the heavenly demonic power. Zhou Wenyuan smiled and said, we can't conclude that he cultivated the heavenly demonic power just because of this, but we can't be too careful. More importantly, Chu Li's advancement is beyond imagination. Even describing it as 1,000 miles in a day is not enough. There must be a reason for this. If we can obtain the secret of his advancement, it will be of great benefit to Taihao Peak. Junior brother Zhou, are you saying that we should take this opportunity to force him to confess the secret of his martial arts advancement? Wang Shoren chuckled and said. Zhou Wenyuan said, Chu Li is young and impetuous. He probably doesn't want to be forcibly examined. He feels that it is humiliating. Wang Shoren shook his head. Junior brother Zhou, you underestimate Chu Li. Although he is young, he is very calm. Junior brother Zhou, you should forget about this idea. Taihao Peak does not need this kind of method. No matter what, as long as it is beneficial to Taihao Peak, we must give it a try. Zhou Wenyuan smiled. Wang Shoren chuckled and looked at Deng Xing. Young Deng, do you think he is a heavenly demon? I suspect that he is, Deng Xing said in a low voice. Deng Xing said in a deep voice, there are too many Azuras that have died in his hands, and no one can compare to him. Even Uncle Master Lu did not kill as many as he did, and Sky Demon specializes in restraining Azuras, so it is not strange that he can kill them easily. Are there many people who think the same as you? Wang Shoren asked. Deng Xing nodded. Senior and junior brothers all suspect that he cultivated the heavenly demonic power. Peak leader, if this is true, Taihao Peak's loss will be immeasurable. That is why we would rather kill the wrong person than let him go. Rather kill the wrong person than let him go. Wang Shoren chuckled and said, if someone suspects that you, Deng Xing, have also cultivated the heavenly demonic power, and your senior and junior brothers and junior sisters think like you, what would they do? Would they rather kill the wrong person than let him go? Deng Xing's expression changed and he hurriedly said, but Peak leader, he is an outsider after all. He is not a disciple of Taihao Peak. Although he is not a disciple of Taihao Peak, his wife and confidants are disciples of Taihao Peak. Would he harm Taihao Peak? Wang Shoren shook his head and smiled. I don't believe it. Then we should at least check if he has cultivated the heavenly demonic power, right? Deng Xing was unwilling to give up. Wang Shoren smiled. A random rumor has thrown us into confusion. Are Taihao Peak disciples so easily bewitched? Peak leader, Zhou Wenyuan smiled. It is not without reason that this news can affect the hearts of the disciples. Wang Shoren looked at him. Zhou Wenyuan said, Chu Li is not a disciple of Taihao Peak after all, but he has obtained far more than the disciples of Taihao Peak. It is inevitable that there will be some jealousy. Wang Shoren smiled. Junior brother Zhou, do you think that I have handled things unfairly? I dare not. Zhou Wenyuan shook his head and smiled. Peak leader has always been fair. How would we dare to doubt him? Wang Shoren said, the heaven-shaking pavilion did not predict whether he is a heavenly demon or not. Could it be that they could not predict this at all? Zhou Wenyuan had a deep relationship with the heaven-shaking pavilion. The heaven-shaking pavilion's shadow must have been involved in his visit this time. This, Zhou Wenyuan sighed. As far as I know, the heaven-shaking pavilion could not predict his background. It is possible that he has a top-notch artifact on him that conceals the heavenly design, making it impossible to predict. Wang Shoren smiled sarcastically. The heaven-shaking pavilion wants this artifact, right? Chapter 23:23. Deng Xing turned to look at Zhou Wenyuan with an ugly expression. He did not expect Masters Junior Zhou to be interested in Chu Li's treasure and not whether Chu Li was a heavenly demon. Masters Junior Zhou had a close relationship with the heaven-shaking brothel. He must have given the treasure to the heaven-shaking brothel. Fawning over the heaven-shaking brothel was a betrayal to the Taihao Peak, and his intentions were too sinister. He did not want to be harmed by Chu Li, nor did he want the Taihao Peak to suffer any losses. Zhou Wenyuan said, Peak Leader, if Chu Li's treasure falls into the hands of Asuras or heavenly demons, it will be a disaster for the realm beyond heavens. We can only let him suffer." Wang Shoren chuckled and shook his head. "Junior brother Zhou, we are not the rulers of the realm beyond heavens. For the sake of the world, it is better to take his treasure." Zhou Wenyuan smiled. "Peak Leader, this is not the time to be merciful." Wang Shoren smiled sarcastically. "Pompous! Don't mention this again. He is a guest of the Taihao Peak, you can't act recklessly." Sigh. Zhou Wenyuan shook his head. "Peak Leader is wise and powerful, but he is too soft-hearted." Deng Xing felt the battle of words between the Peak Leader and Zhou Wenyuan, but he was used to it. From what he knew, Zhou Wenyuan had a high chance of becoming the Peak Leader, but it fell on Wang Shoren. This caused Zhou Wenyuan to be resentful and fight with Wang Shoren. Zhou Wenyuan was very confident. He had a cousin who was an elder of the heaven-shaking brothel, so he was the first to know about the heaven-shaking brothel. He could also cooperate with the heaven-shaking brothel, so his wish came true. Wang Shoren said, "Forget it, junior brother Zhou, it is better not to plot against Chu Li's treasure. The Taihao Peak can't afford to lose face. As for not being able to predict it, it might have something to do with the void-breaching pearl I gave Chu Li." "You gave him the void-breaching pearl?" Zhou Wenyuan's expression changed. The void-breaching pearl was a treasure inherited from the upper heaven. It could break through the void and could be used to save one's life at a critical moment. One pearl could save one life. Even Great Heaven Peak did not have many of such precious items, but they had given them to Chu Li. Wang Shoren smiled. "I have not given you the right to the void-breaching pearl? You are the Peak Master, of course you can give the void-breaching pearl to whoever you want." Zhou Wenyuan scoffed. "But Peak Leader, don't forget the difference between the inside and the outside. No matter how close Chu Li is, he's just Shao Qi's husband, not our disciple." Deng Xing was also somewhat dissatisfied, but he did not dare to show it. The void-breaching pearl was a treasure that all the disciples of Great Sky Peak yearned for. They could not obtain it unless they had performed a great service. Moreover, it was said that there were only 5 void-breaching pearls, and no one knew how many were left. Could it be that the last one was given to Chu Li? Wang Shoren said, "Junior brother Zhou, if you have the time to worry about it, why don't you go to the foreign battlefields and kill more Asuras? With the appearance of the Asura deity king, there's nothing to go to in the extraterritorial battlefield." Zhou Wenyuan shook his head. "I heard that it's a female Asura. It's the first time the Asura realm has produced a goddess king. I'd like to see for myself." He had just received news from the heaven-shaking tower that this Asura deity king was actually a female, which made him extremely curious. Male Asuras were bloodthirsty, while female Asuras preferred peace and quiet. With the birth of a female Asura deity king, the extraterrestrial battlefields would be peaceful, and the conflicts between Asuras and Celestials would be reduced. Wang Shoren smiled. He knew from Zhou Wenyuan how terrifying this female Asura deity king was. Seeing how Zhou Wenyuan looked down on her, he could only sigh inwardly. He thought about it and still reminded, "Junior brother Zhou, this female Asura deity king has earth-shattering skills, you must not come into contact with her, or you'll die. You'll know once you ask the heaven-shaking tower." To become an Asura deity king, the heaven-shaking tower's deduction is extremely difficult, it's hazy and blurry. Zhou Wenyuan sighed. Wang Shoren said, "This shows how terrifying she is." Understood. Zhou Wenyuan immediately retracted his contempt. He knew that Wang Shoren's words were not empty words. Even so, the female Asura deity king must be extremely terrifying. It was best not to provoke her. Deng Xing said anxiously, "Peak Leader, are you not going to care whether Chu Li is a heavenly demon or not?" "How?" Wang Shoren smiled faintly. "Are you going to force him to test himself?" "Of course." Deng Xing quickly said, "Now, it's not just our Taihao Peak, it's spread throughout the entire Grandmaster realm. Everyone wants to know if Chu Li is a heavenly demon or not. Zhou Wenyuan smiled. I heard that Jianfei was able to enter the heavenly demon realm because of Chu Li's help. Now that I think about it, Chu Li is indeed worthy of suspicion. If there's a problem, will he take the initiative to help Jianfei? Wang Shouren said, doesn't this show that he's magnanimous? Zhou Wenyuan shook his head. He's just trying to show that he's magnanimous. Forget it, pretend we didn't hear anything. Wang Shouren lost his patience and waved his hand. Go. He got up and left with a flick of his sleeve. Zhou Wenyuan's face darkened. He took a deep breath and regained his composure, then slowly walked out. Deng Xing quickly followed him. Masters Junior Zhou, what do we do? Since the peak leader has spoken, what can we do? Zhou Wenyuan shook his head. It's inevitable that the disciples have doubts, but we'll just have to bear with it. But what if he really is a heavenly demon? Deng Xing scoffed. Then wouldn't our Taihao Peak become a joke? Zhou Wenyuan said proudly, who can laugh at our Taihao Peak? Heavenly Demon's boundary or even Azura's boundary, Deng Xing said. If he really is a heavenly demon, those two boundaries will definitely make us laugh to death. Zhou Wenyuan walked out of the basilica and glanced at Deng Xing. The peak leader is good at everything, but he's too benevolent. He's also mindful of his reputation. There are some things that he can't bring himself to do. Deng Xing pondered. How about we do it ourselves? Up to you. Zhou Wenyuan waved his hand. I don't know anything. Deng Xing smiled. Masters Junior, don't worry, you won't be implicated. Zhou Wenyuan glanced at him and quickened his pace, quickly disappearing. Chu Li was cultivating the heavenly spirit scripture in the Lu Yurong courtyard. He was stuck at the 6th level, unable to reach the 7th level. The spiritual energy that the heavenly spirit scripture required was not pure enough. Even the spiritual energy from the upper heaven seemed to be purer. He needed a purer spiritual energy. He had been purifying the spiritual energy, strand by strand. Fortunately, he had a large ocean of energy, so his cultivation was twice the result with half the effort. As long as his 9 oceans of energy were filled with pure spiritual energy, there was a chance that he could cultivate to the 7th level in one go. Suddenly, chaotic footsteps came from outside. 12 Taihao Peak disciples came to the courtyard and stopped. Lu Yurong had been sent to the extraterrestrial battlefield by Chu Li. Lu Yurong was very confident in him, thinking that he could handle it with his intelligence and martial arts, so she went to the extraterrestrial battlefield to train herself. Is Chu Li here? Deng Xing's voice was heard. He had brought along 11 great Void Peak disciples, all of whom were male, and they were all staring at the gate of the small courtyard like tigers watching their prey. Chu Li stood up and opened the door. He fist saluted. I'm Chu Li. What can I do for you? Deng Xing said. I heard that Chu Li is a heavenly demon. Chu Li burst out laughing. Ridiculous. Deng Xing said. We don't believe it either, so we want to find out. Chu Li asked, how do we find out? He knew that these people could not hold back and were finally going to make a move. When he saw the hostility in the 12 disciples' eyes, he could not help but sigh. No matter how talented these Taihao Peak disciples were, they would still be jealous because of women. It was the nature of men. Chapter 23-24. Deng Xing said, that's easy. Our Taihao Peak has a secret skill called the light skill. As long as it's used, the heavenly demon has nowhere to hide. Chu Li smiled. Do you think I'm a heavenly demon? It's highly possible, Deng Xing said. He glanced at the other 11 disciples and said, the light skill will prove your innocence. Chu Li asked, is this the peak leader's idea or your own? The peak leader won't care about such a small matter. We can solve it ourselves. Chu Li, do you dare to try? Deng Xing asked. Chu Li shook his head. Since it's not the peak leader's idea, I can't agree to it. Please leave. Deng Xing's face darkened and he stared at him coldly. Chu Li, think carefully. If you don't agree, it means you're guilty. Chu Li smiled and waved his hand. It's none of your business whether I'm guilty or not. Please leave. He was not someone who would be manipulated by others. If he really agreed to their request, he did not know what other tricks they would use to torture him next time. He would like to see what they would do. If there were rumors that he was a heavenly demon, they would ask him to prove his identity. If there were rumors that he stole something, would they search his luggage or his courtyard to prove his innocence? If he agreed to this, they would definitely push their luck. He never saw a person's heart in a good light. Instead, he speculated that they had the worst intentions. These 12 people were hostile. If he were to suffer and endure humiliation, he would definitely be humiliated even more. He might as well reject them. Deng Xing crossed his arms and smiled coldly. Looks like you're really guilty. Chu Li smiled nonchalantly. It's not up to you to decide whether I'm guilty or not. Please leave. He turned around and was about to return to the courtyard. Wait! Deng Xing shouted in a deep voice. Chu Li ignored him and went straight to the courtyard. He was about to close the door. 2 young disciples took 2 steps forward and blocked the door. They stared at him coldly. Deng Xing said in a low voice, "What a rude fellow." Chu Li channeled the inner energy in his hands and the 2 young disciples felt their fingers go numb. Half of their bodies went limp and they could not exert any strength. They could only watch as Chu Li slowly closed the courtyard door. Deng Xing saw that the courtyard door was about to close, so he hurriedly stepped forward and pressed on the door. He shouted in a deep voice, "Chu Li, how dare you!" As soon as his hand touched the courtyard door, a tyrannical force surged up. His body involuntarily flew out and heavily fell 2 feet away. Pung! The ground trembled. Chu Li opened the courtyard door and looked at him. "You didn't hurt yourself, did you?" As he spoke, he shook his head. "I didn't expect you to be so useless as a disciple of Great Void Peak." Sigh, he sighed. "With such cultivation and skills, you're still worrying about your Great Dawn Peak, worrying about whether I'm a heavenly demon or not. In my opinion, you should just obediently go back and cultivate in seclusion. Don't worry about such things and be distracted. As a dignified disciple of Great Dawn Peak, you only have this little ability. I really feel ashamed for you. If it was me, I really wouldn't have the face to say that I'm a disciple of Great Dawn Peak." Each of his words was sharper than the one before, and each of them was like a sword that pierced Deng Xing's heart. Deng Xing's face was flushed red. He lay on the ground but could not get up. His whole body was numb and he had lost control of his body. He could not exert any strength at all. He could only listen to Chu Li's sarcasm and look at him while shaking his head. He was so ashamed that he was about to go crazy. The color of his face darkened from red to purple and even black. His breathing became heavier and more rapid. He wanted nothing more than to pounce on Chu Li and tear his mouth apart. Chu Li glanced at the remaining 11 young disciples and said, "As a disciple of Great Dawn Peak, your cultivation level is so low. You're a disgrace to Great Dawn Peak. Do you think you're qualified to know whether I'm a heavenly demon or not? You're not qualified." After he said that, he turned around and was about to close the door. "Chu Li!" Deng Xing hissed. He stood up shakily and was on the verge of collapsing. He could barely support his body, but he could not exert any strength at all. It was as if his martial arts had been crippled. However, such a blow did not dampen his spirit. He yelled angrily, "You dare to attack me?" Chu Li smiled. "What attack did I make? I just used a little strength to close the door. This is Lu Yurong's courtyard. There should be a difference between men and women. As a male disciple, can you enter a female disciple's courtyard as you please?" "You!" Deng Xing gritted his teeth and glared at Chu Li. He was speechless. Everyone's courtyard was their own territory. It was their own independent kingdom. Outsiders could not invade it. If they wanted to enter the courtyard, they would need the owner's permission. Otherwise, entering someone else's courtyard would be a violation of Great Dawn Peak's rules and they would be punished. Moreover, they should be severely injured by the courtyard owner. Chu Li looked at them deeply. You're just following the crowd. How sad and ridiculous. I feel embarrassed for the Peak Master. He recruited you brainless people. Shut up. Deng Xing yelled. Don't insult the Peak Master. You're the ones insulting the Peak Master, aren't you? Chu Li scoffed. Do you think that the Peak Master is blind and has been deceived by the heavenly demon? If you believe the Peak Master, you wouldn't have listened to this rumor. Deng Xing and the others were speechless. From the bottom of their hearts, they believed that the Peak Master would not be deceived. The Peak Master was wise and powerful. If it was really the heavenly demon, how could it be hidden from the Peak Master? They were just using this as an excuse to deliberately make things difficult for Chu Li. Using this rumor as an excuse was the best. If Chu Li obediently accepted the light techniques test, they would not deliberately distort the truth. They were just venting their anger. Chu Li shook his head and closed the courtyard door. Deng Xing and the others stood outside and looked at each other. After a few glances, their gazes all fell on Deng Xing. Deng Xing gritted his teeth. This Chu Li doesn't respect the disciples of Great Dawn Peak at all. It's true that our cultivation levels are not up to par and we've indeed embarrassed Great Dawn Peak. However, this Chu Li has acted so cleanly. He's really vicious. He's trying to trample on Great Dawn Peak to make a name for himself. Senior brother Deng, we can't ask for help again, can we? A young man said softly. This is too embarrassing. They realized that the gap between them and Chu Li was too big. They were not on the same level at all. Their jealousy was not as strong, but they were unhappy. As disciples of Great Dawn Peak, they were favored by the heavens. When had they ever been humiliated like this? Senior Sister Fu will never help. A young disciple shook his head. Everyone's expression darkened. One of the main reasons they came here to cause trouble for Chu Li was Fu Kaiwei. As the number one disciple of this generation of Great Dawn Peak and a goddess in the hearts of the disciples, it was intolerable that she favored a disciple from the outer peak. What about Senior Brother Huang? Another young disciple asked. Senior Brother Huang, Deng Xing shook his head. Senior Brother Huang is also no match for him. Then what should we do? If it doesn't work, we can ask Senior Brother Lu for help. It's a pity that Senior Brother Lu isn't here. Deng Xing scoffed. Senior Brother Lu has a good relationship with him. He won't help either. A young disciple frowned. Then we can only ask an elder to help. Masters Junior Zhou won't help, right? Deng Xing shook his head. Masters Junior Zhou was a cunning old fox. He would not do such a thing. Chapter 23-25. As for Masters Senior Lan, Deng Xing remained silent. Master Senior Lan will definitely take care of it. The young man beside him quickly said, Master Senior Lan abhors evil. Moreover, Chu Li humiliated us and treated us Taihao Peak disciples like nothing. Then let's invite Master Senior Lan. Deng Xing said, You must make it clear to Master Senior Lan. We all suspect that Chu Li is a heavenly demon. Even if he's a celestial, he may have cultivated the heavenly demonic power. It's very likely that he has recently cultivated the heavenly demonic power and used the peak leader's trust. We can't let Chu Li get away with it and fool around with Taihao Peak. Understood, understood. Everyone nodded. They quickly left. Chu Li stood in the courtyard and shook his head. He increasingly felt that this group of Taihao Peak disciples were childish. Even if they were skilled in martial arts and had high qualifications, they unfortunately lacked training and setback. That was why they were all impulsive, reckless, and simple-minded. He understood that women were impulsive because he could not avoid it. It was a man's nature, but he looked down on such crude methods. It lacked a little challenge and was boring. He thought about it and walked out of the courtyard. He saw two young disciples standing outside. When they saw Chu coming out, they took 2 steps forward and blocked his way. Chu, where do you think you're going? Chu squinted at them. The 2 young men were handsome. Even though they knew that Chu's cultivation level was far higher than theirs, they still blocked him without fear. Don't even think about running away. Are you feeling guilty? Chu said, I have something to ask the peak leader. Are you going to stop me? To see the peak leader? The 2 young disciples frowned and hesitated. No matter how impulsive or how much they hated Chu, they knew that if Chu wanted to see the peak leader, they could not stop him. Otherwise, it would be against the rules and they had no right to decide who would see the peak leader. Chu said, I want to ask the peak leader. Is this how Taihao Peak treats its guests? Wait. The 2 did not care about breaking the rules and quickly stepped forward to stop him. If Chu complained at this time, they would definitely be punished. It did not matter if they were punished, as the punishment would not be too severe. However, they would be utterly humiliated. Not only did they fail to cause trouble for Chu, but they were also taught a lesson by the peak leader. They were completely controlled by Chu. What would their peers think of them? What did Senior Sister Fu think? Chu smiled. If I cripple your cultivation level, I wonder how the peak leader will punish me? The 2 of them curled their lips and snorted disapprovingly. I don't think you have the guts. No matter how reckless they were, Chu could not cripple their martial arts. After all, this was Great Howling Peak. Chu did not stop moving forward. He shook his head and smiled. The 2 of them stood in front of him, watching him approach, but they did not move. Chu flashed, and they only saw a blur before Chu disappeared. The 2 men's expressions changed. They quickly looked left and right, but there was no one there. Then, they used their light body technique and ran towards the peak leader's basilica. When they reached the central staircase of the cutting-through peak, they looked up and saw that Chu was already standing outside the basilica. He even turned his head and smiled at them. They could clearly see the corner of Chu's lips curling up into a mocking smile. The 2 of them were furious but helpless. They could only watch as Chu entered the basilica. Wang Shouren was sitting in the armchair in the middle of the room. When he saw Chu enter, he waved his hand and gestured for him to sit down. Chu sat next to him, closed fist saluted and smiled. Peak leader. What's the matter? Wang Shouren asked. Chu said, Peak leader, have you heard the rumors in the peak? Yes, it's very lively. Wang Shouren shook his head and laughed. There are people secretly adding fuel to the fire, causing a ruckus. Chu said, Peak leader, have you never suspected that I'm a heavenly demon? Haha. Wang Shouren laughed and waved his hand. I've never suspected that you're a heavenly demon. Chu smiled and asked, why? As a peak leader, he would not trust anyone easily. Wang Shouren smiled. The secret skill that I cultivate can sense the heavenly demonic power. If you're a heavenly demon, you won't be able to hide from me. Chu nodded in realization, then smiled. Peak leader, why don't you just tell the disciples and prove my innocence? I'd like to see it too. Wang Shouren smiled. Don't you think it's interesting? Chu said, I don't think it's interesting. There are already disciples from your peak who came looking for trouble. These people should be taught a lesson. Wang Shouren said, Don't be polite, just teach them a lesson. Chu shook his head. Wouldn't Taihao Peak lose face? Taihao Peak's face is not given by others. Wang Shouren smiled. Being defeated by you won't hurt Taihao Peak's dignity. Chu smiled. Peak leader, please spare me. I don't want to be a whetstone. When I defeat the young ones, the old ones will come. When one fails, another will come. I can't fight the entire Taihao Peak, can I? It's not impossible, as long as you can do it. Wang Shouren smiled. Chu frowned. Peak leader, we have to agree in advance. Once we fight, I won't purposely help Taihao Peak's reputation. If Wang Shoren was using him to train the Taihao Peak disciples, then he would not be polite. He would also use Taihao Peak to make a name for himself. They were using each other. Wang Shoren sized Chu Li up and smiled. Looks like you're very confident. Chu Li smiled. Wang Shoren sighed. Taihao Peak has been getting more and more arrogant in recent years. Everyone thinks that they're the world's #1 sect and look down on all heroes. It's not a good thing to lose their modesty. Chu Li frowned. Peak leader, if I defeat them, the Taihao Peak disciples still have this bit of magnanimity. Wang Shoren smiled. Even if you defeat all the disciples, they won't vent their anger on Xiao Qi and the other 2 women. Chu Li shook his head. Peak leader, you think too highly of them. Suddenly, footsteps were heard and stopped outside. Then, a loud voice was heard. Peak leader. Wang Shoren sighed. Senior Brother Lan, please come in. A tall and skinny old man slowly walked into the main hall. He was like a skinny tiger with thick eyebrows and big eyes. His nose was straight. He had a dignified appearance and a righteous expression. His big eyes were full of power. His cold gaze swept over Chu Li as he slowly walked toward Chu Li. Chu Li stood up and looked at him calmly. He gave him a fist salute. Wang Shoren asked, Senior brother, what's the matter? Lan Biave sized Chu Li up and said in a deep voice, according to Xiao Deng, this young master Chu Li taught them a good lesson. He let them know that the Taihao Peak disciples are so useless and weak. Chu Li smiled and did not say anything. Wang Shoren sighed. It was Xiao Deng and the others who took the initiative to cause trouble for Chu Li, right? They suspect that Chu Li is a heavenly demon. Lan Biave shook his head. These little fellows are muddle-headed. Although they have a pure heart, they act recklessly. But since when did others have the right to teach our Taihao Peak disciples a lesson? He did not wait for Wang Shoren to reply and threw a punch at Chu Li. Chu Li lightly pushed out his palm. Bang! Lan Biave was sent flying out of the main hall. He flew out of the stairs outside the main hall and landed at the bottom of the stairs. He staggered a few steps back and almost fell. Deng Xing and the others were watching from afar. They were ready to see Chu Li's embarrassing performance and how he would be defeated by Lan Biave. They did not expect to see this scene. They could not help but wonder if Lan Biave had angered the Peak leader and was thrown out by him. Azura's palm. Wang Shoren was surprised. Chu Li smiled. Yes. Wang Shoren sighed and shook his head. Senior Brother Lan did not lose unjustly. He could tell at a glance that Chu Li's Azura's palm was profound. It was silent but like thunder. Lan Biave had no chance of winning. Chapter 23-26. Lan Biave staggered a few steps back. His face was purple and he was furious. His loose green robe fluttered like a gust of wind. His hair fluttered along with it. You're courting death! He yelled and shot into the basilica like a bolt of lightning. The shadow of his fist condensed into a flame and rushed towards Chu Li. Chu Li stretched out his hand and squeezed gently. The flame was extinguished and the fist force disappeared without a sound. Lan Biave was already in front of Chu Li and punched again. Chu Li turned his wrist and slashed like a blade. Lan Biave had no choice but to withdraw his fist and followed with his left. Chu Li met it with his right palm. Bam! Lan Biave was thrown out like a pellet and landed at the bottom of the steps outside the basilica. After stumbling a few steps, he managed to stand still and almost fell. His face had turned green and his eyes were like torches. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. He said to Wang Shoren, "This Senior Lan is so persistent. You can't be too harsh, right?" Sigh. Wang Shoren shook his head and sighed. He knew Chu Li's cultivation level was high, but he did not expect Azura's palm to be this powerful. Brother Lan could not even withstand one move from him. This was a huge setback for Brother Lan. It was fine if Chu Li was older, but he was so young. How could Brother Lan accept this? Ah! Lan Biave roared and was about to rush in again. Wang Shoren exhaled and shouted, "Brother Lan!" It sounded normal to outsiders, but it was like thunder in Lan Biave's ears. He could not help but freeze. Wang Shoren said calmly, "Brother Lan, you are not Chu Li's opponent. Why humiliate yourself? Come in and talk." Lan Biave took a deep breath and his face darkened. He slowly walked into the basilica. Deng Xing and the others who were watching from afar turned to look at their companions. They looked at each other and their faces darkened. Was there no one who could stop Chu Li? They must be secretly laughing at Tai Hao Peak for having no one. When they thought of this, their blood boiled and they wanted to beat Chu Li down. However, when they thought of their cultivation level and Chu Li's, they were immediately doused with cold water. Their faces darkened. Wang Shoren smiled and said, "Senior brother Lan, is it Xiao Deng and the others who are crying to you?" Lan Biave had a fierce look on his face. He cupped his fists and said coldly, as expected of an outstanding young man, "This old man admires you." He considered himself to be a magnanimous and upright person. A loss was a loss, and there was nothing to be said if his skills were not as good as others. To have such a cultivation at such a young age, he was indeed a genius among geniuses. Juniors like Deng Xing could not compare to him. Chu Li smiled and gave a fist salute. Wang Shoren asked, "Are you worried that Chu Li is a heavenly demon too, senior brother Lan?" Peak Master's eyes are unfathomable. How could he be deceived? Lan Biave scoffed. He did not deal with Chu Li because of the heavenly demon, but purely for Deng Xing and the others. As a disciple of Tai Hao Peak, how could he allow himself to be bullied by outsiders? Although Chu Li was the son-in-law of Tai Hao Peak, he was not a disciple of Tai Hao Peak. Never had he thought that not only would he not be able to vent his anger, he would be taught a lesson instead. It was really a case of failing miserably in an easy task. Although he was angry, he was helpless. His skills were not as good as others, and he could only sigh helplessly. He could only look at this brat with his eyebrows raised high. Wang Shoren smiled and said, "Senior brother Lan has finally come to his senses. Someone is instigating such a ruckus outside. Why didn't Peak Master make it clear to the disciples?" Lan Biave frowned. Wang Shoren said, "I took the opportunity to see the disciples' performance." Lan Biave scoffed. It's inevitable for young people to be reckless and impulsive. Moreover, they're also concerned about Tai Hao Peak. They're all fellows who won't amount to much. Wang Shoren shook his head. Their hearts change according to their state, and they're extremely impetuous. Lan Biave opened his mouth but could not say anything. Deng Xing and the others were indeed too reckless and impetuous. They rushed here impatiently just after spreading the news. It was obvious that they harbored dissatisfaction and were extremely hostile. Therefore, once they found an excuse, they hurriedly made a move. In the end, they were taught a lesson by Chu Li, so they ran over to ask for help. These methods were too simple and could be understood at a glance. No matter how high their cultivation level was, they would still be digging their own graves by acting like this. This was in Tai Hao Peak. If they were in the foreign battlefield, a small trick would be enough to kill them without them knowing how they died. Chu Li smiled and said, "Peak Master, they'll be fine after some training. With their temperament, they won't be able to withstand training. Their lives will be in danger once they enter the foreign battlefield." Wang Shoren scoffed. Lan Biave sighed and shook his head. Chu Li said, "Don't enter the foreign battlefield for now. Train in the outland first and go out more. You'll naturally gain knowledge and broaden your horizons, and your mind will become more mature. With Tai Hao Peak's reputation, few people would dare to kill them. As long as they did not kill them, Tai Hao Peak would not seek revenge. However, if they killed a Tai Hao Peak disciple, Tai Hao Peak would definitely kill them or even take revenge. In such an environment, although the training they endured was limited, it could still improve their mind. Compared to being directly thrown into the foreign battlefield, It was much safer to train between life and death, but the effect was not as good. Suddenly, footsteps were heard, and a handsome middle-aged man walked in. His purple tunic made his face look like jade. It was Zhou Wenyuan. With one hand behind his back and the other in front, he entered the hall in high spirit. He gave a fist salute and smiled. Peak Master, Senior Brother Lan. Junior Brother Zhou. Lan Biave frowned at him and scoffed coldly. Zhou Wenyuan smiled. I heard that Senior Brother Lan lost to Chuli? Chuli looked at him calmly. It was obvious that he did not come with good intentions. I'm just not as skilled as him, Lan Biave said coldly. Are you here to laugh at me? I wouldn't dare. Zhou Wenyuan waved his hand and smiled. I wouldn't dare to laugh at Senior Brother Lan. I'm just here to ask for some advice from Chuli. You're no match for Chuli, Lan Biave scoffed. Don't embarrass yourself. Zhou Wenyuan turned to look at Chuli as if he had just seen him. He gave a fist salute and smiled. Chuli, I'm Zhou Wenyuan. I'd like to ask you a question. Senior Zhou, please speak. Chuli sized him up. Zhou Wenyuan said, the heaven-shaking pavilion said that they couldn't divine you. You must have some kind of treasure on you, or else it would be too strange. Chuli smiled. I do have a treasure that can hide one's energy, but they couldn't divine me. Maybe it's because I've also cultivated the flying star technique. You've cultivated the flying star technique? Zhou Wenyuan was surprised. Chuli extended his hand and pointed. TSS. With a soft whistle, Zhou Wenyuan quickly blocked with his palm. Bam 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 bam. He took 3 steps back and stared at Chuli with a flushed face. His expression was extremely ugly. The finger force in his body was attacking him relentlessly. It was invincible, and his inner force was actually unable to withstand it. He could only watch helplessly as it burrowed into his dantian and took up residence there. He instantly lost control of his inner energy. It was as if his cultivation level had been crippled. Chuli smiled. How's my flying star finger? I hope Senior Zhou can correct me. Zhou Wenyuan forced a smile and gave a fist salute. You're indeed a genius among geniuses. I'm impressed. As soon as he finished speaking, the finger force in his dantian disappeared, as if it had never existed. To be able to enter his dantian in one go and break through layers of obstacles without hurting himself, Chu Li's control of the finger force had reached a magical level. It was beyond his imagination. Chu Li gave a fist salute and smiled. Senior Zhou, you flatter me. Zhou Wenyuan forced a smile. Chapter 23-27. Zhou Wenyuan was annoyed. He felt like he had wasted his time. It was not a treasure that could hide from the heavens, but the flying star technique. There were not many treasures in the world that could conceal the secrets of the heavens, but there were still quite a few of them. However, treasures like Chuli, which the heaven-shaking tower could not derive even with all their might, were extremely rare. If one could obtain such a treasure, it would be a powerful defensive weapon, especially for a top-notch sect like the Taihao Peak. With such a treasure, they would have more power to suppress the world. Unfortunately, he now realized that he had wasted his time because of the flying star technique. Thinking of this, his smile became more awkward. Chuli glanced at him and saw through his intentions, but he was too lazy to say anything. Some people did it for benefits, some for feelings. Everyone had their own plans, so it was hard to say who was right and who was wrong. Wang Shoren chuckled and waved his hand. This matter ends here. Don't make a fuss anymore. It'll only make people laugh. Yes. Zhou Wenyuan nodded helplessly. He glanced at Chuli, his eyes flashing. Chuli smiled at him. Zhou Wenyuan obviously did not give up and wanted to cause more trouble. Wang Shoren looked at Lan Biave. Senior Brother Lan? Get these brats to leave the mountain, Lan Biave said hatefully. They'll only become useless if they stay here. No matter how strong their martial arts was, If they were not smart enough, it would be like a toddler wielding a large knife. Not only would they not be able to kill others, but they would also easily kill themselves. This was something the Taihao Peak wanted to avoid. Wang Shoren nodded. Chu Li Fist saluted. Peak leader, I'll be leaving now. Wang Shoren frowned and stared at him. Are you disappointed? Chu Li smiled. It's not that serious. It's just a farce. I'm just thinking of taking a walk down the mountain. That's fine. Wang Shoren smiled. Don't worry about it. We're not outsiders, so don't stoop to their level. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. Suddenly, a chuckle sounded beside his ear. The laugh was lazy, but there was a hint of magnetism in it. Chu Li's expression changed. He shouted, Sui Miaozhu. What Sui Miaozhu? Wang Shoren and the other two looked at him blankly. Chu Li's expression darkened. He had already activated the omniscient mirror and saw Sui Miaozhu standing outside the basilica. Her face was covered with a white veil and her clothes were as white as snow, fluttering gently in the wind. She looked like a fairy that was about to leave with the wind. He took a deep breath, turned around and said, Azura deity King Sui Miaozhu. He never thought that Sui Miaozhu would be so daring, to actually dare to directly barge into the great Empyrean Peak. What shocked him even more was that the great Empyrean Peak's great protective formation actually couldn't be activated, and there was no reaction, allowing Sui Miaozhu to soundlessly enter. This was simply something unimaginable, and it was even more baffling. Why would Great Sky Peak's peak guarding Grand Formation be so useless? Wang Shoren frowned, shook his head and laughed. Don't joke around. Zhou Yuan and Lan Biave looked at Chu Li strangely. They felt that his solemn expression was ridiculous and baffling. Chu Li looked outside the basilica and said in a low voice, Since the ruler of God is here, why don't you come in? Zhou Yuan and Lan Biave did not notice Sui Miaozhu's presence, and even Wang Shoren did not notice her. Wang Shoren had a special skill that allowed him to sense the heavenly demon, but he could not sense the Azura deity king. This did not make sense. It could only be said that Sui Miaozhu's cultivation level was stronger, and had completely surpassed their level. They were not in the same realm. If he did not have the omniscient mirror, even if Sui Miaozhu chuckled beside his ear, he would not be able to sense her presence. Sigh. Sui Miaozhu sighed softly, and walked into the basilica with light step. The basilica suddenly lit up, and her body seemed to be emitting a hazy brilliance that illuminated the basilica. The expressions of Wang Shoren and the others changed slightly, and their hearts trembled. Sui Miaozhu was clearly in front of them, but they did not sense anything at all. There was nothing in front of her, as if she did not exist. This was obviously a cultivation level that far exceeded their own, and was a great threat. Chu Li's expression was solemn, and he said in a low voice, How dare you, ruler of God? Do you think you can do whatever you want in the world? Sui Miaozhu chuckled and shook her head. I'm really disappointed. The Taihao Peak is just an empty shell to scare people, and you think you're so powerful. Chu Li said, Aren't you afraid of being left behind, ruler of God? That depends on the Taihao Peak's ability. Sui Miaozhu smiled. Chu Li said, Looks like the Azura realm is going to expand and attack the Outland. Sui Miaozhu shook her head gently. What's the use of expanding? It's just a turbid atmosphere, and I'm only here to kill you. Chu Li, if there are any casualties in the Taihao Peak, it's all because of you. Chu Li's face darkened and he said, You'll have to depend on your ability to kill me. Right after he said that, he suddenly disappeared from the spot. Sui Miaozhu was stunned and her eyes flashed. The inside of the basilica suddenly lit up. She was quite surprised. The entire basilica had been locked by her, and the void could not be shifted. Logically speaking, he could only accept his death. Moreover, it was impossible for the Taihao Peak to build such a strange stone tower, and it was impossible for him to escape. However, he just had to escape, and her plan fell through. she frowned and prepared to leave. The more difficult it was to kill Chu Li, the more she wanted to kill him. She could not wait any longer, and it had even become an obsession that she could not get rid of. If she did not get rid of him, she would not be able to organize the Azura realm in peace. Therefore, she could not wait to break into the Taihao Peak, even if it was a huge risk. However, she did not expect the Taihao Peak's peak protection formation to be so weak, and it was completely powerless. It was obvious that she had underestimated the heroes of the world. She immediately understood why the Taihao Peak was like this. It was obvious that they had turned off the peak protection formation and did not operate it. They were confident that the heroes of the world would not dare to break into the Taihao Peak, and even if they did, they would be courting death. Ha ha! Wang Shoren suddenly looked up and laughed. His laughter broke the silence of the basilica, and the three of them looked at him. What an Azura ruler! Wang Shoren's laughter stopped abruptly, and his face darkened. He said coldly, "How dare you?" Sui Miaozhu said calmly, "What do you want, Peak Leader Wang? Since you're here, ruler, don't leave." Wang Shoren said coldly. He hid his chest with both palms. Dong! His chest was hollow, and a strange sound came from it. His clothes and hair fluttered without any wind, and a ray of light fell from the sky, piercing through the roof of the basilica without any obstruction, and landed on the top of Wang Shoren's head. He slowly floated into the air. His eyes lit up like two lanterns, and only two balls of white light could be seen, and his pupils and expression could not be seen. Enlightened deities descent. Sui Miaozhu spat out 4 words and looked up at the sky. Suddenly, a ray of light fell and her body glowed. She slowly floated into the air, and stood opposite Wang Shoren. The air in the basilica suddenly became sticky, and Lan Biave and Zhou Wenyuan had difficulty breathing. They hurriedly retreated out of the basilica, and their expressions were dark and ugly. They never thought that the Azura ruler would be so daring as to directly break into the Taihao Peak. This was something that had never happened before, and the peak leader had used enlightened deities' descent. This was not good. Boom! The sound of thunder came from the sky, and the sky above the basilica distorted. The basilica seemed to have fallen into a lake, and its shape changed as the lake water moved. The two of them retreated again. At this time, the Taihao Peak disciples heard the commotion and rushed over. Chapter 23-28. They wanted to approach the main hall but were ordered to retreat by Zhou Wenyuan and Lan Biave. Their expressions were gloomy as they turned to glare at the disciples who came to watch the show. They cursed inwardly. How could they watch such a battle? Lan Biave shouted, "Scram! Scram!" Zhou Wenyuan said slowly, "This is a dangerous place. Do not approach. Disciples, retreat to your own courtyards. Do not go out." Yes. Everyone cupped their fists helplessly. Lan Biave and Zhou Wenyuan were both elders of the peak. They did not dare to disobey, and could only move slowly. Deng Xing said, "Masters Junior Lan, Masters Junior Zhou, which madman dares to barge into our great heaven peak? He's courting death. Shut up and F***ck off." Lan Biave glared as he shouted, and his eyes emitted lightning that was extremely terrifying. He was disappointed in Deng Xing. Not only was he narrow-minded, he was also short-sighted and impatient. It was hard for him to achieve anything great. At this time, he was unwilling to be left out and moved forward, seeking his own death. He was even more repulsive. Deng Xing was in a sorry state. He cupped his fists with a red face and did not dare to disobey Lan Biave. Zhou Wenyuan smiled. "Why are you so angry, senior brother Lan? He's still young. He'll be fine after some training." He's just a piece of trash," Lan Biave said coldly. Zhou Wenyuan shook his head. "That's not necessarily true. We great Heaven Peak disciples are all good." Lan Biave glanced at him. He could not be bothered to expose his attempt to win people's hearts. He turned to look at the main hall. The main hall seemed to be submerged in a lake. It seemed to be rippling with the lake water, faintly discernible. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The entire main hall was instantly torn apart. Everyone was retreating. When they heard the loud sound, they turned to look and were shocked. The Peak Master's main hall had been passed down for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. Although it had been repaired dozens of times, it had never reached this level. In the void stood Sui Miaozhu in a snow-white dress and Wang Shouren in a fluttering green robe. The two of them stood in the void. Their clothes fluttered like immortals. Good. Sui Miaozhu snorted. Her smooth and gentle voice resounded throughout the entire great heaven peak. Wang Shouren said coldly, "Divine King, do you really think there's no one in the sky beyond heaven? No one in Great Heaven Peak?" "So what?" Sui Miaozhu said indifferently, "Can you make me stay?" Wang Shouren said, "If the deity king dares to act recklessly, then this old man can only follow suit. We Asuras are undying and indestructible." Sui Miaozhu chuckled. "I can't kill them all, but your great Empyrean peak is different. As long as this seat is ruthless, how many of your great Empyrean peak disciples can remain?" Wang Shouren said indifferently, "Then the God King can give it a try." Sui Miaozhu's bright eyes spun, and her gaze swiftly swept past all the disciples of Great Sky Peak. Their bodies immediately froze. They were intimidated by her clear gaze and didn't have the slightest intention to resist. It was as if they were sheep that had encountered a lion and wanted to obediently wait for death. "Humph!" Wang Shouren snorted. Everyone immediately sobered up and broke out in a cold sweat. Sui Miaozhu chuckled and said, "It only takes one move to kill them. Peak Leader, are you really going to protect Chuli?" "Chuli has already left," Wang Shouren said coldly. Sui Miaozhu shook her head. "I must kill Chuli." "Why does the God King have to kill Chuli?" Wang Shouren said calmly. "No matter how many Asuras he kills, Asuras are undying and indestructible. Why does the God King have such a huge grudge against him? He's too hateful, he must die." Sui Miaozhu said indifferently, "It's not a big deal for him to kill Asuras. Between Celestials and Asuras, you kill me and I kill you. However, he shouldn't have offended the Divine Lady and the God King's palace." "I see." Wang Shouren nodded calmly. "Then we'll see what the God King is capable of. Chuli, if you don't come out, I'll kill all the disciples of Great Sky Peak." Sui Miaozhu chuckled gently and languidly as if she was joking with her lover. There was no killing intent at all. However, everyone was terrified when they heard it. Although Sui Miaozhu's face was covered, one could tell that she was a top beauty just by looking at her graceful figure and bright eyes. However, they didn't have the leisure to admire the beauty at all. They only felt a chill as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. They knew that Sui Miaozhu wasn't joking and would definitely be able to do it. Chu Li's voice echoed from afar. "Peak Leader, if he dares to kill the disciples of Great Sky Peak, you'll have to kill the Divine Lady." Wang Shouren said indifferently, "Of course. Unless the God King kills me." Sui Miaozhu scoffed. "That depends on whether you're capable of doing so." As soon as she finished speaking, she gently slapped her palm toward where the disciples of Great Sky Peak were. Wang Shouren abruptly moved in front of the palm energy. Boom! Like a sudden clap of thunder, the ground shook and the mountains shook. As the palm energy collided, the surrounding stone steps tumbled and stone strips flew out. These stone strips that were used to make the stairs were the toughest and heaviest bluestone. They were the size of a human and flew out like pieces of wood. They flew more than 10 meters away and landed on the ground, rolling endlessly. The disciples in the distance swayed and staggered as if they were drunk walking in the wind. Lan Biave and Zhou Wenyuan tried their best to stabilize their bodies, but their feet slid on the ground and they kept moving backward. Wang Shouren said, "Why waste your effort, God King?" Sui Miaozhu scoffed. "You live up to your reputation." You're quite capable, Chu Li. Chu Li's voice came from afar. God King, if you want to find me, you should come find me yourself. His voice became softer as he spoke, as if he was getting further away. Sui Miaozhu scoffed. Chu Li, you're abandoning Great Sky Peak. Aren't you a disloyal person? If you don't show yourself today, I'll uproot Great Sky Peak. How arrogant of you! Wang Shoren said calmly. If the God King dares to do so, I'll sacrifice my cultivation level to take you down with me. He spoke calmly but with an indisputable aura. Sui Miaozhu frowned and glared at him. The Peak Master is the arrogant one. She was confident that she could suppress Wang Shoren. After all, her cultivation level was higher. Although Wang Shoren had also performed Enlightened Master's descent, it was still weaker than hers. The Enlightened Master he chose was not as powerful as the one she chose. The Enlightened Master's descent was powerful and had the ability to shake the heavens and the earth. However, there was a difference in strength between Enlightened Masters. The person who performed Enlightened Master's descent had a difference in strength, hence the difference in strength. She was confident that she could suppress Wang Shoren. However, if she pushed Wang Shoren into a corner and provoked him to go all out, she would not be able to gain anything. It was unnecessary. She only wanted to kill Chu Li. She only wanted to find the reason why Chu Li was able to leave. He escaped last time and this time. He escaped under impossible circumstances. There must be something strange. Zhou Wenyuan raised his voice. God King, Chu Li has a void-breaching pearl. You can't catch up to him. Void-breaching pearl. Sui Miaozhu frowned. He has a void-breaching pearl? She initially thought that Chu Li was able to escape because of the stone tower. Now, it seemed like the stone tower was just a distraction. The void-breaching pearl was the key. Junior brother Zhou. Wang Shoren looked at Zhou Wenyuan coldly. Zhou Wenyuan felt a stinging pain in his eyes. He could not help but tear up as the pain was unbearable. Wang Shoren suppressed his anger and turned to look at Sui Miaozhu. God King, let's fight to our heart's content. As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his palm forward. Bam 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 bam. Sui Miaozhu struck out with her palm several times. It was like a series of explosions in the air. The Taihao Peak disciples kept retreating. Step by step, they retreated down the stairs. After a while, they had retreated 100 meters away. Wang Shoren's expression was solemn. Sui Miaozhu's eyes flickered. Both of them were not at ease. Chapter 23-29. The battle between the two was exquisite, but the surrounding disciples could not see it clearly. Their movements were too fast and beyond their eyesight. They could only see two balls of light, one white and one green. Sometimes they mixed together, sometimes they moved separately, but in the end they kept colliding. As the two fought, the surrounding sand and pebbles flew. All the steps disappeared, but the shattered basilica was preserved. An invisible force grew and shrouded the basilica. It was the effect of the formation. Sui Miaozhu chuckled. What's the use of opening the formation now? Most formations defended against the outside but not the inside, or defended against the inside but not the outside. You could only choose one and not both. Taihao Peak's mountain shielding formation and the basilica's formation defended against the outside but not the inside. Now that she was inside the formation, she was not affected at all. Wang Shoren frowned and struck with his palm. It was exquisite, but he sighed in his heart. The mountain shielding formation consumed a lot of energy and would not be activated unless it was necessary. Moreover, no one dared to break into Taihao Peak. Unexpectedly, the Azura deity king took advantage of this time and found a loophole. Otherwise, it would take some effort for her to enter. However, at the level of the Azura deity king, such a formation might not be able to stop him. It would just consume some energy. The more they fought, the more he realized how terrifying Sui Miaozhu was. The enlightened master she was attached to had a high cultivation level. If it was not for the profound martial arts he cultivated, he would have been defeated. If he was defeated, it would be terrifying. Just thinking about it made him feel cold. She spoke softly and did not hold back when she killed. It was just like how Celestials treated Azura, they did not see each other as the same kind. Bang! Wang Shoren suddenly trembled. Sui Miaoju's slender palm landed on his back, and he was frozen in the air. Sui Miaoju struck several more times. It seemed like she was leisurely, but she was extremely fast. Wang Shoren spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. His body quickly withered, and he was about to be defeated. He was shocked. He did not expect Sui Miaoju to be so difficult to deal with. She hid her strength before and attacked at the crucial moment to injure him. If this continued, he would die. Sigh. A long sigh was heard. Chu Li suddenly appeared in front of the basilica. Chu Li. Sui Miaoju chuckled. You really showed up. Chu Li was carrying a sword case on his back. He shook his head and said, Why do you have to be so overbearing and insist on killing me, Deity King? You know what I mean. Die. Sui Miaoju knew that Chu Li was cunning and unpredictable. Without giving him a chance to speak, she suddenly appeared in front of him in a flash. Chu Li disappeared from where he stood, but there was a flash of silver light at his original position, colliding with Sui Miaoju. Sui Miaoju patted it without a care. Chi! The soft whistling sound was like clothes being torn apart. Sui Miaoju instantly retreated swiftly like a bolt of lightning, and her bright eyes flickered like cold stars. A few bloody injuries had already appeared on her arm, causing her flesh to curl up and reveal her ghastly white bones, causing her to seem extremely terrifying. Wang Shoren's spirit was roused. The people in the distance also saw the hideous wound on Sui Miaoju's white jade-like arm and were greatly shocked. Although they could not see the fight between Sui Miaoju and Wang Shoren clearly, they knew how terrifying Sui Miaoju was. Even when the Peak Master cast the Enlightened God's Descent, he could not hurt her. Instead, he was injured by her. Now, she was injured, and it was Chu Li who injured her. Chu Li's face turned pale. The energy of the heavenly spirit scripture condensed in his 9 Chihai had been used up by half. The heavenly spirit scripture could indeed restrain the Azura deity king and the enlightened god's descent. Fortunately, his deduction and speculation were correct. Otherwise, he would be the one lying on the ground right now, and he might even lose his life. Sui Miaoju's bright eyes flashed, and she coldly said, Good, good. She was about to move again. The sword wheel above Chu Li's head spun faster again. Sui Miaoju glanced at the sword wheel, a little fearful. She did not expect Chu Li to really be able to injure her. She thought that Chu Li would not dare to face her head-on, and could only run for his life. She did not expect that with the body of a deity king and the enlightened god's descent, she would be injured by Chu Li. The energy on Chu Li's sword was strange and her inner energy could not expel it. It was as if it had its own will that was wreaking havoc in her body. She used all her strength to expel it from her body. This Chu Li's sword energy could restrain her Azura power technique. This was absolutely intolerable. She must kill Chu Li. Her thoughts became firmer, and in a flash she appeared behind Chu Li. Her jade-like palm gently pressed down. It seemed slow, but it was so fast that no one could react. Chu Li knew that his speed was not as fast as hers, and he could not react in time. However, with the help of the nature restoration manifestation, he could see her movements in advance. Thus, he allowed her jade-like palm to hit him, and the silver light shot toward her chest, intending to injure both of them. Humph! Sui Miaoju dodged sideways, but she had no choice but to retract her palm and hit his shoulder instead. The silver light changed its direction and shot toward her chest again. Ding 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 ding. The golden sword in Sui Miaoju's sleeve met the silver light, and it let out a series of rapid ringing sounds. When everyone heard this, they could not help but retreat. Their faces were flushed, and their hearts were shaken by this clear ringing sound, and they almost vomited blood. "Humph!" Wang Shouren shouted, and then pounced toward Sui Miaozhu. When everyone heard this shout, their bodies instantly relaxed, and they let out a long sigh of relief. They hurriedly retreated, wanting to put some distance between them. Wang Shouren managed to suppress his injury in a short while, and together with Chu Li's 9 swords, they suppressed Sui Miaozhu. For a moment they were in a stalemate. The crowd could not see their movements clearly, and they could only see the 3 of them tangled together. Deng Xing's face was flushed, and he glanced at his 11 companions around him. They initially thought that Chu Li's cultivation level was profound, but it was only 1 level higher than theirs, and it was not much higher. However, they never expected that he had already reached such a level. It was a level that they could never imagine, and they might not even be able to reach in their lifetime. No wonder he was favored by Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue, and even senior sister Fu thought highly of him. As expected, he had amazing skills. Compared to them, he was nothing, and they were worlds apart. Not only Deng Sheng and the other 11, but the rest were also shocked, including many Taihao Peak elders who came to investigate. They finally understood why the peak leader tried so hard to rope in Chu Li. It was not only because he was the son-in-law of Taihao Peak, but also because of his powerful cultivation level. Another Song Wuji was about to appear. Chu Li activated the Heavenly Spirit Scripture to its limit, but the Heavenly Spirit Scripture's inner energy became thinner and thinner, and the silver light from the 9 swords integration gradually dimmed. The Heavenly Spirit Scripture's inner energy could replace the 9 swords integration technique's inner energy. This was a pleasant surprise, and it was more powerful, but the 9 swords integration technique consumed too much inner energy. Even though he had 9 C of Qi, he could not perform more than a few swords. As time passed, as the Heavenly Spirit Scripture was activated, the lazy little beast in his mind slowly opened its eyes and stood up. It stepped into the void, and its fur fluttered as if it was standing in a strong wind. Its eyes shot out 2 bolts of lightning. Chu Li squinted his eyes and shouted, "Ruler of God!" Sui Miaozhu looked at him. Then, when she met Chu Li's gaze, her heart trembled. "Very well, you'll see how I kill you next time." Sui Miaozhu shouted and suddenly disappeared. Wang Shouren was stunned, but he did not chase after her. Instead, he turned to look at Chu Li. Chu Li had already closed his eyes and was panting in the void. Suddenly, white mist surged out of his body and condensed into a white cloud above his head. His clothes were suddenly drenched in sweat, as if he was suddenly drenched in rain. Blood flowed from the corner of Wang Shouren's mouth, and he slowly fell to the ground. Chu Li also fell straight to the ground and staggered for a while before he stood up. It was as if he had just been fished out of the water. He gave a fist salute with difficulty. "Thank you, Peak Leader." Chapter 23:30. The surrounding people rushed forward in a hurry. Lan Biave shouted, "Don't move around." Zhou Wenyuan glided closer and asked, "Peak Leader, are you all right?" Wang Shouren waved his hand. "Protect us. The disciples don't have to surround him. He won't die." "Yes." Zhou Wenyuan closed fist saluted and looked at Chu Li. Chu Li sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes, looking solemn. The ground was barren without a single blade of grass. It was smooth and flat as if someone had shaved it. Wang Shouren sat down too. The earth-shattering aura around him dissipated, and he became dispirited. He looked haggard like an old man, giving off the feeling that he had 1 foot in the grave. The surrounding people felt sad and wished they could treat him with their own bodies. The enlightened master's descent ended and the enlightened master left. He was no longer young, and after 1,000 years of his life was taken, he changed significantly. His hair quickly turned gray as if it was covered in a layer of frost. His face was covered in a layer of wrinkles. His skin that was as smooth as a baby's became loose and dull. A white mist condensed on top of his head. He was motionless as if he was dead. The disciples stared at him worriedly, afraid that something bad would happen to Wang Shouren. They glanced at Chu Li, who was beside Wang Shouren from time to time. Some were envious, some were jealous, and some were angry. The person who was furious thought that this woman was provoked by Chu Li. If not for Chu Li, this woman would not have broken into Taihao Peak and hurt the Peak Master. Everything was because of Chu Li. They stood quietly at the side, afraid to disturb Wang Shouren's healing. Zhou Wenyuan and Lan Biave stood on one side and scanned the surroundings, afraid that someone would take advantage of the situation. Although the mountain protection formation was activated, they did not dare to let their guard down. What if the Azura deity king had companions that broke in and did not make a move? The two did not dare to relax. Their bodies were tense and ready. It did not matter to Chu Li. If anything happened to the peak leader, Taihao Peak would be heavily injured. This would be a fatal impact and unacceptable to Taihao Peak. 2 hours later, Chu Li slowly stopped. Wang Shouren did the same. The two of them opened their eyes, and cold lightning flashed in front of everyone's eyes, forcing them to squint. Wang Shouren let out a long sigh of relief. His hair was still frosty white, but the skin on his face had already recovered its smooth and plump appearance, like that of a baby, full of vitality. Chu Li gave a fist salute. Peak leader. Wang Shouren waved his hand and sighed. I didn't expect the Azura deity king to be so difficult to deal with this time. As expected of the unprecedented deity king, Chu Li sighed. She's the only one among the 4 great reverend lords. Her prestige is unparalleled, and no one can steal her limelight. That's why she's stronger than all the previous deity kings. Without the peak leader this time, I'm doomed. Wang Shouren laughed and said, with the void-breaching bead, you could have escaped, but you just had to come back. We've implicated you. But this goddess king escaped this time, but what about the next time? As he spoke, he frowned. He couldn't help but worry when he thought of how powerful Sui Miaozhu was. Other than Song Wuji, no one could stop her. However, Song Wuji was in isolated cultivation. He would not stop Sui Miaozhu unless it was absolutely necessary. Once Sui Miaozhu went crazy, the entire Grandmaster realm would be turned upside down, and the world would be in chaos. He waved his hand at the crowd. Disciples, I'm fine. Go back and cultivate. Don't think that Taihao Peak is invincible. Yes, Peak leader. The crowd responded with a solemn and heavy expression. They couldn't wait to go into isolated cultivation immediately. The next time the woman in white tried to break into the peak, they would let her know that Taihao Peak's reputation as the world's #1 sect was not just for show. The crowd hurriedly returned to their respective courtyards to cultivate, and a round of hard cultivation was set off. Under the stimulation, all the Taihao Peak disciples worked hard, and their cultivation level improved by leaps and bounds. Zhou Wenyuan approached him and gave a fist salute. Young Master Chu, how did you offend the Azura deity king? Back then, I killed an Azura honorable lord with Senior Lu, and the rest were relentless in seeking revenge. In the end, I killed another 2 honorable lords, so I decided to get rid of the last one, and that was Sui Miaozhu. Zhou Wenyuan and Lan Bafei's eyes flickered, concealing the shock in their hearts. Zhou Wenyuan was well informed, and he knew that 3 Azura honorable lords had fallen, but he did not expect them to be related to Chu Li. The first one was killed by him and Lu Jianfei, and the last 2 were killed by Chu Li. They all knew how powerful the Azura honorable lords were, but they never expected Chu Li to be the one who killed them. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. I didn't expect the goddess to stop me, and in the end, Sui Miaozhu became the Azura deity king. How could she let go of me, her enemy? She might not want to kill the rest of the Grandmaster realm, but she insisted on killing me. You might be able to escape this time, but you might not be able to escape next time, Lan Biave said. This time, it was because the peak leader was there that they were lucky enough to repel Sui Miaozhu. The next time Sui Miaozhu came with a helper, the peak leader and Chu Li would not be able to defeat them. Chu Li said, "I'm preparing to go to the foreign battlefield." "That's a good place." Lan Biave quickly nodded. He was afraid that Chu Li would continue to stay at Tai Hao Peak. Tai Hao Peak would not be able to withstand such a torment. He knew the price of the enlightened master's descent. If it happened 2 more times, the peak leader would really lose his life. Wang Shoren smiled. "Senior brother Lan, don't worry. It's not as serious as you think." He also had a technique to extend his lifespan, so the price of using the enlightened master's descent was only 100 years of lifespan. Chu Li sighed and shook his head. 100 years of lifespan was nothing compared to 1,000 years of lifespan, but it was still shocking. An inch of gold could not buy an inch of time. Wang Shoren said, "Chu Li, you might be able to fight back." To injure the Azura deity king who was in the enlightened master's descent state, this was inconceivable to someone who was not an enlightened master. Chu Li said, "The Heavenly Spirit Scripture." Wang Shoren frowned. "You're using the Heavenly Spirit Scripture?" Chu Li said, "Only the Heavenly Spirit Scripture can injure him. Otherwise, he won't be able to fight back at all. You're quenching your thirst with the Heavenly Spirit Scripture." Wang Shoren shook his head. "It's best not to cultivate the Heavenly Spirit Scripture. It won't end well. It's a forbidden technique. I didn't expect you to cultivate the Heavenly Spirit Scripture." He knew the heart technique of spirit beasts in the Sutra library very well. He was tempted before, but his rationality won out and he did not cultivate it. Chu Li smiled bitterly. "I can't care about that now." Thunder Pool's Song Wuji greets peak leader Wang. Suddenly, a clear voice was heard. Chu Li's expression changed. The omniscient mirror had already seen a middle-aged man standing at the foot of the mountain. He was handsome and wore a white robe. He stood with his hands behind his back. He was like a jade tree standing in the wind. He had an indescribable elegance. Song Wuji seemed to have sensed Chu Li's prying and looked up. Chu Li felt his eyebrows tighten. He was secretly shocked and quickly retracted the omniscient mirror's observation. "Pool leader Song, please." Wang Shoren frowned at Chu Li, then glanced at Zhou Wenyuan and Lan Biave. Zhou Wenyuan quickly waved his hand. "Peak leader, we didn't tell anyone." Looks like he sensed the deity king's aura. "I didn't expect him to come out of isolated cultivation." Wang Shoren sighed. He looked at Chu Li. "Chu Li, it's better for you to stay away." Chu Li said, "I wanted to meet Song Wuji." Wang Shoren shook his head. "He's unscrupulous. He'll attack you on the spot if he sees you. It's not wise for you to fight against such a master now." Chapter 23:31. As soon as he finished, he disappeared in a flash. He had already returned to Lu Yurong's courtyard. The omniscient mirror was still observing him, but it had already activated the life and death scripture to hide his aura. When he looked at Song Wuji again, he did not notice anything, which made Chu Li secretly heave a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the life and death scripture was profound enough. Song Wuji's moon-white robes fluttered in the wind, looking confident and calm. Just his temperament alone was enough to make one's heart tremble, and if it was a woman, it would be very difficult to resist. The white robe that Chu Li was wearing was a floating silkworm-treasured clothing that was given to him by Shao Qi. It matched his temperament well when he wore it. Song Wuji's temperament was even more outstanding and captivating. Even though Chu Li was hostile towards him, he could not help but admire him. This kind of person was indeed extraordinary, as if he was born to be an outstanding person. Song Wuji ascended Great Dawn Peak step by step in a leisurely and slow manner, yet his speed was extraordinarily swift, as if he'd shrunk the ground into an inch. After a short while, they arrived outside the main hall. Wang Shoren was already standing at the top of the mountain to welcome them. He cupped his fists and smiled. "Welcome, Lake Master Song, please come in." Peak Leader Wang, how have you been? Song Wuji smiled and cupped his fists. He walked up to him and said, I sensed that there was a fierce battle over here. Unfortunately, I was a step too late and didn't get to see it. Master Song Qi has indeed arrived a step too late. Otherwise, we would have had the chance to eliminate the Azura deity king. Wang Shoren shook his head and sighed. This Azura deity king is truly impressive. As a woman, she is superior to men. She is truly a formidable opponent. Peak Master failed to severely injure her. Song Wuji was surprised. Wang Shoren gestured for them to enter the room. The two of them entered the main hall and sat down. I'm ashamed to say this. My cultivation is a level lower than hers, and I was lucky enough to defeat her. Wang Shoren waited for the teacup to be served. He lifted the teacup, took a sip, and slowly put it down. He sighed and said these words with a helpless expression. It's actually so troublesome? Song Wuji frowned. Then I really shouldn't have dilly-dallied. I was in seclusion at the beginning, but when I sensed the aura here, I needed some complicated methods to exit. Even though I tried to hurry, I was still a step too late. What a pity! Wang Shoren smiled. It seems like Pool Master's cultivation level has improved greatly, and there is hope for you to become a great heavenly god. There's no hope for the great deity. Song Wuji shook his head and frowned. The higher I go, the more I feel that the great God of heaven is so far away that it makes me despair. If Master Qi feels hopeless, then I should give up. Wang Shoren smiled and said, What kind of divine technique did Master Qi cultivate this time? I'm perfecting the spirit-devouring art. Song Wuji frowned. There's not much progress. I created this art in a flash of inspiration. It's impossible to surpass it. I can only slowly grind it down step by step. Spirit-devouring technique. Wang Shoren shook his head in disapproval. Song Wuji smiled and said, Peak Master, you are bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying mankind. You feel that we should not devour spirit beasts, right? It is indeed a little cruel. Wang Shoren nodded slowly. Song Wuji said, Spiritual beasts are not humans. Those who are not of the same race will have different intentions. Killing them is killing them, just like Azura. Spirit beasts don't deserve to die like Azura, Wang Shoren said. Song Wuji said, That's because of the archaic Treaty of Alliance. Otherwise, spirit beasts would definitely eat humans. Wang Shoren sighed. Although spirit beasts are fierce, they have to abide by the treaty. Why must they kill them? Survival of the fittest, survival of the fittest. There's no other way. Song Wuji shook his head. They can only blame themselves for not being strong enough. Peak Master, let's not talk about this for now. Should we go to the Azura realm? Wang Shoren looked at him in surprise. Song Wuji said, It's impolite not to reciprocate. Since she barged in, let's accompany her. Let's go and witness the grace of the first Azura goddess king. I'm afraid that's inappropriate. Wang Shoren said slowly, If that's the case, it'll be a big deal. I'm afraid the world will be turned upside down. He had to consider the consequences, the impact on Taihao Peak, and even the Beyond Heavens realm. If the two of them went to the Azura realm and caused a ruckus, Sui Miaozhu would definitely come back for revenge. Unless the two of them could get rid of Sui Miaozhu. Song Wuji was strong, but Sui Miaozhu was not weak either. Moreover, the Azura realm was guarded by the goddess. Song Wuji chuckled. Peak Master, you're too indecisive. You're overcautious. We've cultivated to this level. Do we have to be so hesitant and restrained? Wang Shoren said, You have to think for the disciples. The younger generation has their own fortune. Why think so much? Are we going or not? Song Wuji said disapprovingly. Let me think about it. Wang Shoren said. Song Wuji said, How's Fu Saiwei's martial arts? I'm waiting for her to come to me. She's still far from it. Wang Shoren smiled and sighed. I'm afraid it's impossible for her to catch up to you. But it's still a good thing. She's been working hard and her martial arts skills are getting better and better, far surpassing her peers. Peak Master, are you thinking of imitating the Azure realm and having a female Peak Master? Song Wuji laughed. Chu Li sat in the courtyard with a heavy expression. Song Wuji did not take Fu Kaiwei seriously at all. He knew that Fu Kaiwei wanted revenge, but he still allowed her to grow. He was confident that she would not be a threat to him. Fu Kaiwei was a true genius, and he was very confident. It seemed like he did not take Chu Li seriously either. Because of the life and death scripture, Chu Li's potential was far from Fu Kaiwei's. Fu Kaiwei came from a prestigious family and had such extraordinary potential. She looked down on Chu Li even more. Chu Li initially thought that it was because she was in isolated cultivation that she did not find trouble with him. Now it seemed like she was too lazy to care about him. What kind of strange technique was the spirit-devouring technique? What did it have to do with Spirit Beast? He thought about the promise he made with the Spirit Tiger to kill Song Wuji. Could it be because of this spirit-devouring technique? Wang Shoren smiled. If Kaiwei can really do that, so what if she becomes a Peak Master? What courage! Song Wuji gave him a thumbs up. I don't have such courage. Even if there are female disciples with high cultivation levels, it's impossible for them to become the master of the Thunder Pool. The Tai Hao Peak is different from the Thunder Pool. It's natural, Wang Shoren said. The Thunder Pool's inheritance was the power of thunder. It was the natural counter to a woman's feminine temperament. Therefore, the people in the Thunder Pool were mostly men. There were no women. Women were not suitable to cultivate the Thunder Pool's martial arts. Song Wuji looked around. I heard that Chu Li is on the peak too? You want to look for Chu Li? Wang Shoren smiled. Song Wuji said, this kid is indeed a rare talent. He has a trace of this seat's shadow. Yes. Wang Shoren nodded slowly. Song Wuji smiled. All right then, I'll let him go this time. Peak Master, have you thought about it? Forget it. Wang Shoren shook his head. I'll bear with it for now. We'll see. Sigh. Song Wuji shook his head. Peak Master, your personality is really... Forget it. If that's the case, I'll go to the Azura boundary myself. As he finished, he disappeared in a flash. Chu Li felt his body relax. His tightened heartstrings loosened as well. Even though he used the life and death scripture to hide his aura, he was still nervous. Song Wuji's aura was so strong that it seemed to have formed a world of its own. Even without the descent of an enlightened master, he had the aura and power of an enlightened master. Such a cultivation level was terrifying. Chu Li was no match for him. However, he had gained a lot this time. He finally understood the difference between him and Song Wuji. He also had a clear goal. However, to cultivate to such a level was still a long way away. How could he reach it? Chu Li was at a loss. He walked out of the courtyard slowly and arrived at the basilica where Wang Shoren was. Chapter 2332. Wang Shoren was sitting in the basilica with a serious face. When he saw Chu Li, he gestured for Chu Li to sit down. Chu Li closed fist saluted and sat on the armchair. Song Wuji? You've seen Song Wuji, right? Wang Shoren's face was heavy. He's very elegant, right? Chu Li nodded slowly. Wang Shoren said, You saw the difference? Chu Li smiled bitterly. The difference of an enlightened master. Wang Shoren nodded slowly. If you can see that, it means that the difference between you and him is not as big as you think. If Kaiwei were here, she would not be able to see anything. She might feel that the difference is not that big. It seems like your cultivation level is also rare. Because of the life and death scripture, he could not see through Chu Li's cultivation level. He only felt that he was far from Song Wuji. Chu Li shook his head. Too big of a difference. Wang Shoren said, Your rise is not any less than Song Wuji's, but you are 1,000 years behind. Song Wuji is also a genius. He has been improving for the past 1,000 years, so it's hard to make up for the difference. Chu Li nodded. Wang Shoren continued, don't be discouraged. Song Wuji was just lucky to receive the Thunder Pool. You might have the same luck, so don't rush, take it slow. Chu Li asked, what martial arts does Song Wuji cultivate? His martial arts are broad and profound, but the most powerful is the Thunder Pool's antique study and his self-created spirit-devouring technique. Wang Shoren frowned and his face darkened. Chu Li quickly said, spirit-devouring technique? What does it have to do with the heavenly spirit scripture? He had already guessed the theory behind the spirit-devouring technique and wanted to confirm his guess. Spirit-devouring technique. Wang Shoren scoffed and sneered. It's evil. Chu Li looked at him. Wang Shoren scoffed. It's to consume the spirit of spirit beasts to replenish oneself, thus strengthening one's spirit. This martial art should not exist in this world, but unfortunately, no one can control it. Chu Li said, strengthening one's spirit? Can it increase one's lifespan and soul? That's right. Wang Shoren nodded slowly. The reason why Song Wuji has his current cultivation is because of the wonders of the spirit-devouring skill. Although it's brutal and domineering, it's truly exquisite. Devouring a superior-grade spirit beast is even more powerful than devouring natural treasures. While natural treasures are hard to find, spirit beasts are not. Chu Li frowned and said, don't the spirit beasts and the celestial beings have an agreement not to offend each other? They have already entered the 100,000 mountains. Would Song Wuji dare to disobey? He was able to enter the 100,000 mountains and devour the spirit beasts and escape unscathed. Wang Shoren shook his head and sighed. He has the supreme treasure of the Thunder Pool, even a supreme spirit beast can't do anything to him. Chu Li asked, what treasure? The Thunder Seal, Wang Shoren said, contains the essence of the world's thunderbolts, and its power is boundless. Even a supreme spirit beast can't suppress it. Chu Li furrowed his brows. He's broken the alliance. Don't tell me the spirit beasts won't dare to retaliate? What is the power that binds the spirit beast and forces it to stay in the 100,000 mountains? Wang Shoren pointed to the sky. Chu Li came to a realization, the upper heaven? Wang Shoren shook his head. As far as I know, it's the 9th heaven. That 9th heaven is not our 9th heaven. The 9th heaven of the Outland Realm is just an imitation of the 9th heaven. In fact, we're only at the 3rd heaven. Chu Li's spirit was lifted. He really did not know about such a secret. Moreover, the book did not mention it clearly. Only the leaders of sects that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years would know about it. Wang Shoren sighed and said, the lowest heaven is entered through reincarnation. It can't be directly connected to the lower realm. Our outland is connected to the lower realm and can be accessed through the divine gate. Our world is not connected to the upper heaven. We need to ascend to enter. Chu Li nodded and listened. He stared at him without blinking. Wang Shoren said, the heaven above is something we can't pry into. There are no records of it in this world. The origin of the spirit beasts is very powerful. They could originally go straight to the 9th heaven. Later, they were banished to the lower realm and were restricted. They can't leave the 100,000 mountains, which is no different from being imprisoned. Occasionally, they leave the 100,000 mountains and enter our world. They can't kill anyone or they will be punished by the heavens. However, they are not subject to this rule in the 100,000 mountains. Chu Li frowned and pondered. It seemed that the spirit beasts killing people outside the 100,000 mountains were not punished by the heavens. His purple dragon had killed people in the Jueyuan Valley. Wang Shoren said, there are many supreme spirit beasts in the 100,000 mountains. Even we celestial beings don't dare to enter. There's only death. Even if I were to enter as an enlightened master, it would be difficult for me to escape. Song Wuji's speed is beyond imagination because of the Thunder Seal. He could escape with his life. He has the Thunder Seal and is as fast as lightning. Doesn't that mean no one can kill him? Chu Li frowned. Wang Shoren shook his head. If he wanted to escape, it would be very difficult to kill him. Not to mention that your and Saiwei's cultivation level is lower than Song Wuji's. Even if your cultivation level is higher, you might not be able to kill him. Chu Li sighed. Now I'm thinking about how to get past the Azura Deity King. I'm afraid. He shook his head as he spoke. Wang Shoren smiled bitterly. He was also worried for Chu Li. The Azura Deity King was determined to kill him. He would die without a doubt. His chances of survival were very slim. In terms of restraining the Azura power technique, the Heavenly Spirit Scripture does have some effect. Wang Shoren said, but the difference between the two of you is too big. Chu Li said, other than the Spirit Beast Heart technique, is there anything else that can restrain the Azura power technique? Other than the Spirit Beast Heart technique, the only thing that can restrain the Azura power technique in the world is the Heavenly Demonic power, right? If you have the same cultivation level as her, the Heavenly Demonic power can restrain her. Unfortunately, Wang Shoren shook his head. Sui Miaozhu's cultivation level was rare. Only Song Wuji could match her. Although the Heavenly Demonic realm was strong, there might not be anyone who could surpass Sui Miaozhu. Looks like I can't get someone else to do the dirty work. Chu Li smiled. Song Wuji can't possibly kill the Azura Deity King. Because of the Divine Lady? Wang Shoren asked. Chu Li nodded. The Divine Lady is even stronger than the Azura Deity King in the Deity King's palace. Wang Shoren slowly nodded. Chu Li remained silent. His Heavenly Demonic Scripture was not high enough for the Spirit Beast Heart technique and the Heavenly Demonic power. His Cloud Slashing power was not good enough either. It was hard for him to match Sui Miaozhu. The strongest Azura power technique was even worse. The Heavenly Spirit Scripture was also stagnant. No matter how he looked at it, it was a hopeless situation. He needed luck. Sui Miaozhu would definitely try to assassinate him again. Would he be able to escape with the void-breaching pearl the next time? Sui Miaozhu was not stupid. He took a deep breath to calm himself down. He thought of a way to save himself. Chu Li, you should stay here, Wang Shoren said. Chu Li shook his head. Thank you, Peak Leader. But I can't stay here anymore. I'm here to bid farewell. Are you afraid of dragging us down? Wang Shoren smiled. There's no need for that. She won't be able to enter so easily next time. The peak guarding formation was already in operation. Chu Li said, staying here is just avoiding death. It's hard to improve my martial arts. If I want to live, I have to go out. But once I go out, I'm afraid the Azura Deity King will be here soon. Wang Shoren frowned. Even with the void-breaching pearl, I might not be able to save my life. The void-breaching pearl was a treasure, but it was not without a way to restrain it. Moreover, the Azura Deity King could suddenly attack from the dark. Chu Li did not even have the chance to use the void-breaching pearl. It was too dangerous for Chu Li to go out. Chapter 23:33. Chu Li fist saluted and stood up. Farewell, Peak Leader. Wang Shoren remained silent. Chu Li looked at him. Wang Shoren sighed and shook his head. Chu Li, I should have passed on the enlightened God descent to you for self-protection. Unfortunately, there are rules that only the next Peak Leader can pass it on. Chu Li smiled. Thank you for your kindness, Peak Leader. Wang Shoren frowned. From the looks of it, the enlightened God descent is the only way to survive the Azura Deity King. However, only the leaders of the 9 divisions possess it. Chu Li asked, the other sects don't have it? Wang Shoren shook his head. This is also the reason why the 9 divisions are so powerful. The enlightened God descent is a forbidden skill that will never be passed on to outsiders. Is there no one in the world? Chu Li smiled. No matter how powerful a sect is, it will be destroyed one day. It's impossible for it to exist forever. Don't these sects have the enlightened God descent? Unless the enlightened God descent is lost, it'll be difficult to destroy a sect, Wang Shoren said. Chu Li sighed. Looks like I'm not fated with it. Forget it, I'll cultivate the heavenly spirit scripture. Wang Shoren nodded slowly. I heard that you have a dragon and Goddess Attraction Mountain has a golden dragon too. It'll be easier to cultivate the heavenly spirit scripture. Once you've perfected it, you'll naturally be able to stop the Azura deity king. Although he said that, he did not have high hope. The spirit beast heart technique was the most difficult to cultivate. Every step was dangerous, and it required a strong foundation and years of accumulation. Cultivating the spirit beast heart technique could increase one's lifespan, but it would become more difficult as time went by. Even with the golden dragon, cultivating the heavenly spirit scripture would be fast in the early stages. However, it would still be difficult in the later stages. One must take one step at a time. Chu Li smiled. I hope so. Farewell. He got up and fist saluted without saying anything else. He strode away. He walked down Tai Hao Peak step by step. When Tai Hao Peak disciples passed by, they would greet him and show their friendliness. Previously, because the Azura deity king had threatened to kill the Tai Hao Peak disciples, Chu Li had stepped forward despite knowing that it was dangerous. This had earned him the recognition of the Tai Hao Peak disciples, and they had truly accepted him as a family. Moreover, he had displayed outstanding martial arts in this battle, which was far superior to the disciples of Vast Sky Peak. The disciples of Vast Sky Peak were even more impressed by him. With peerless martial arts and noble sentiments, Chu Li's reputation had unknowingly spread far and wide. Chu Li returned the greeting with a smile, modest and easygoing. Just as he was about to reach the foot of the mountain, someone suddenly floated in front of him. Chu Li had already seen Lan Biave. Lan Biave stood in the middle of the road and said, Chu Li. Chu Li gave a fist salute and smiled. What can I do for you, Senior Lan? You're going down the mountain? Lan Biave asked in a low voice. Chu Li nodded. Although Tai Hao Peak is a good place, it's not a good place to stay for long. Otherwise, I'll become dispirited and lose my drive to advance. Lan Biave snorted. Do you really not want to live anymore? He was extremely protective of his people and could not tolerate his own people being wronged. Now that Chu Li had been accepted by him, he really could not bear to see Chu Li leaving the mountain to die. Chu Li smiled. Senior Lan, you've underestimated me. With the void-breaching pearl, it won't be that easy for the Azura deity king to kill me. Humph, what if she ambushes you? Lan Biave sneered. If you can block her full-force attack, you'll definitely die. It's better for you to obediently return to the mountain and cultivate hard. It's always good to have another layer of life-saving skills. He felt that Chu Li was a genius. If he cultivated in isolation like Fu Kaiwei, his cultivation level would definitely improve greatly after he came out. Although he would not be able to defeat the Azura deity king by then, he would still be slightly stronger than he was now. His chances of survival would also be higher. Chu Li said, Thank you, Senior Lan. I want to go out and explore. It's easier to improve my cultivation level in a life and death situation. Easier to die, Lan Biave said coldly. Chu Li smiled and gave a fist salute before disappearing in front of Lan Biave in a flash. Lan Biave turned his head to look around, but Chu Li had disappeared without a trace. Uncle Lan's hair fluttered in the wind, but there was no sign of Chu Li under the tree. His expression was solemn. He could only watch helplessly as a prodigy was about to die young. It was a great loss. The heavens were jealous of a hero. If Chu Li had enough time to grow, he might just become another Song Wuji. When he thought of this, he felt that it was a great pity. With a gloomy mood, he turned around and left. Chu Li left Tai Hao Peak and appeared in a stone tower in a flash. Unbeknownst to him, there were already hundreds of chakra pagodas, and there were even close to 1,000 of them. Not only were there in the beyond heavens realm, but there were also many in the Azura realm. Together with the void-breaching pearl, they were truly a powerful weapon for escaping. Chu Li had something to rely on, which was why he dared to leave Taihao Peak. No matter how strong Sui Miaozhu was, she could not hide from his omniscient mirror. Once she got close, he could just return to the Chakram Pagoda. By the time Sui Miaozhu destroyed the Chakram Pagoda, he would have escaped to God knows where. He was thinking about the cultivation of the heavenly spirit scripture. All this while, he had not been in a hurry to restore Goddess Attraction Mountain because its strength was too weak. Moreover, his reputation had not been established yet, so it was not enough to form a deterrent force. He could not fight against an entire sect on his own. He wanted to wait until he was strong enough to restore Goddess Attraction Mountain. If he restored Goddess Attraction Mountain now, it would be a waste of his spirit and energy. It would be unwise. As for the culprit who destroyed Goddess Attraction Mountain, he was also secretly investigating it. He would settle the score with him in the future. Goddess Attraction Mountain's foundation was in the lower realm now, and the disciples of Goddess Attraction Mountain from the Grandmaster realm had also returned to the lower realm. Now, Goddess Attraction Mountain was no longer deserted. Instead, it was extremely lively. Of course, because of their existence, Goddess Attraction Mountain's status was even more respected. If it was not for the fact that they did not care about external affairs, the situation in the lower realm would have changed drastically. It was impossible for him to cultivate the heavenly spirit scripture with the help of the golden dragon. This was because they needed to have a mutual understanding and trust each other unreservedly. Only then would they be able to achieve the realm of unity and unleash its true power. He suddenly appeared in 100,000 Hills and stood next to the ice pool. The sky was clear. White clouds floated in the dark blue sky, making the sky look even purer. It was hard to tell them apart from the surface of the ice pool. The purple dragon and the black tortoise were both sleeping in the pool. The moment he appeared, a red light shot toward his chest. Chu Li extended his palm to block it. Bang! The red light was blocked and hovered in midair. It was a crimson bird looking down at him, its small eyes glaring at him fiercely. Chu Li smiled and staggered a few steps back. It was the little vermilion bird. The little vermilion bird glared at him fiercely and scoffed in his mind. You don't keep your word. How dare you come? Chu Li smiled. It's been very busy in the Grandmaster realm. Wuxia, how have you been? He had promised to come and play with her whenever he had time. Unfortunately, ever since he went to the Grandmaster realm, he had been busy all the time. It was difficult for him to relax in 100,000 Hills. Moreover, the spirit tiger was watching him. The moment he appeared, he felt that the spirit tiger was staring at him. It was silently urging him to cultivate harder so that he could fulfill his promise and kill Song Wuji as soon as possible. The little vermilion bird had completely transformed into a vermilion bird. Its strength was much stronger than before. It had become a supreme spirit beast. Although it was slightly weaker than the spirit tiger, it was still a supreme spirit beast. Its strength was already shocking. He was a little surprised. The purple dragon and the black origin tortoise were not this fast even after their fortuitous encounters. They were still sleeping and showed no signs of waking up. It was likely that they would sleep for a long time. The little vermilion bird saw the surprise in his eyes. It flapped its wings proudly and let out a clear cry. The clear cry echoed in the sky. Bird cries could be heard from afar. They rose and fell, forming a beautiful melody that was intoxicating. Chu Li's tense heart suddenly relaxed. He smiled at the little vermilion bird. Although the little vermilion bird was strong, it was still simple. He felt relaxed and carefree when he was with it. Are you cultivating the heavenly spirit scripture? The little vermilion bird's voice sounded in his mind. Chapter 23:34. Chu Li nodded slowly. You know about the Heavenly Spirit scripture too? Of course I know. The little vermilion bird scoffed. You want to cultivate a spirit beast mantra, so why did you choose the Heavenly Spirit scripture? Chu Li said, It's extremely exquisite. Humph, this Heavenly Spirit scripture is too neutral and peaceful. It is very slow to cultivate. The little vermilion bird seemed to be curling her lips, and her voice was filled with disdain. You must be in danger right now and can't wait to increase your strength, right? The Azura deity king wants to kill me, Chu Li said. Little vermilion bird scoffed. The spirit beast mantra can indeed restrain the Azura power art, but it's not easy for you to fight against a deity king. You need to cultivate the Heavenly Spirit scripture to at least the 8th layer, or else there's no hope. As for completely suppressing an Azura deity king, you need to reach the 9th layer, but the 9th layer is impossible to cultivate. Why can't I master the 9th level? Chu Li quickly asked. Little vermilion bird said, If you want to cultivate the 9th level, you have to ascend to the 4th heaven at least. You can't cultivate the 9th level of the Heavenly Spirit scripture in the 3rd heaven because the spiritual energy isn't pure enough. Only the spiritual energy in the 5th heaven has a chance to cultivate the 9th level of the Heavenly Spirit scripture. With your ability, you should be able to obtain the spiritual energy in the 5th heaven when you reach the 4th heaven, right? Chu Li was shocked and looked at it. Little vermilion bird snorted. We spirit beasts are the most sensitive to spiritual essence. The spiritual essence surrounding your body isn't from this 1st heaven, but from 4th heaven. That's why you're able to cultivate to the 8th level. However, the Heavenly Spirit scroll gets more and more difficult as you progress. The 9th level. Ever since the Heavenly Spirit scroll appeared, it's been hundreds of thousands of years, and only one genius has ever cultivated it. Chu Li frowned and pondered. He had also noticed this problem. The Heavenly Spirit scripture had a special characteristic. The inner force was extremely pure, far more pure than any other mental cultivation method. Furthermore, it required extremely pure spiritual qi to transform. With the pure nature essence on 1st heaven, Haoren could only reach level 4 with the Heavenly Spirit scroll. He could only reach level 6 with the help of the nature essence from 1st heaven, and it seemed that he was not far from level 7. However, it was almost impossible for him to reach the 8th level. He still hadn't found the path, but according to the little vermilion bird, it was possible to reach the 8th level. In that case, it would be impossible for him to use the Heavenly Spirit scripture to deal with Sui Miaozhu. He could only block her attacks, but he couldn't restrain her. He had to cultivate it to the 9th layer. Since the little vermilion bird said that she couldn't cultivate to the 9th layer, it seemed that she really couldn't. The little vermilion bird snorted. Do you want to cultivate to the 8th level? Chu Li quickly nodded and smiled. Can you help me? Of course I can, the little vermilion bird said proudly. I'm not like those 2 useless fellows. But you have to promise me one thing. Chu Li smiled. What is it? Kill Song Wuji. The little vermilion bird's voice suddenly became icy cold in his mind. Chu Li said, Song Wuji? I originally promised him, but I realized that it was too difficult to kill him. Even if I mastered the 8th level of the Heavenly Spirit scripture, I'm afraid. Humph. Mastering the 8th level of the Heavenly Spirit scripture means that there's a possibility of killing Song Wuji. The little vermilion bird said. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Song Wuji possesses the Thunder Seal. The little vermilion bird said. That depends on your ability. The 8th level of the Heavenly Spirit scripture will directly damage the soul. Even an enlightened master will be unlucky. However, he's too fast, so you need to use your intelligence to kill him. Alright. Chu Li slowly nodded. How can I master the 8th level? The little vermilion bird said. I'll find someone to help. You'll need to water a 9-colored fruit with the 4 saints' blood. A month later, after consuming the 9-colored fruit, you'll be able to step into the 8th level very quickly. It's a blessing from the heavens and the earth. Chu Li Fist saluted. Thank you. The little vermilion bird scoffed. The heavenly spirit scripture will attract the wrath of the heavens. You really need to think it through. Once you've mastered the 8th level, you won't be able to cultivate the enlightened master descends anymore. No enlightened master will dare to land on you. Chu Li said, now that things have come to this, I can't care anymore. I'll just take it one step at a time. All right. The little vermilion bird said, come back in a month. I'm going to ask them for help. After it finished speaking in Chu Li's mind, it suddenly turned into a red shadow and disappeared into the void. Chu Li smiled and suddenly appeared at the spirit crane's peak. After playing with the 2 spirit cranes for a while, he reluctantly left the 100,000 hills and suddenly appeared in a stone tower. In order to prevent Sui Miaozhu from tracking him, he had been staying in the wheel pagoda. Even if Sui Miaozhu really chased after him, he would be able to escape quickly. However, he was curious about the outcome of Song Wuji's trip to the Azure realm. Did he injure Sui Miaozhu or even kill her? If he really killed Sui Miaozhu, it would save him a lot of trouble. He flashed a few times and arrived at the foreign battlefield. It was the foreign battlefield between the Grandmaster realm and the heavenly demonic realm. When he appeared here, his tense heartstrings loosened. It was unlikely that Sui Miaozhu would come here, let alone the heavenly demonic realm. This was because the heavenly demonic realm could restrain Asuras. Even if the heavenly demonic realm's master's cultivation level was lower than hers, they could still restrain her. He used his light body technique to go to the heavenly demonic realm. He did not use the void breaching pearl to reach the heavenly demonic realm directly. Instead, he used the wheel pagoda to open up a path. There was a pagoda or several pagodas in every mile. His movements were familiar and smooth. The 9 swords moved and cut rocks as if they were tofu. The jade blood divine claw was engraved and he quickly built a stone pagoda. Although the pagoda was not tall, it had a dignified and mysterious aura. The pagoda was also attached with a formation. When others approached, they would be confused by the formation and ignore the pagoda. They would walk past it and pretend that they did not see it. If a formation master or a top-notch master like Sui Miaozhu came, they might not be able to hide from him. However, it would take a long time to destroy the pagoda. It would take a lot of effort for him to move. As he walked, he built pagodas and formed a unique passage. Others could not find him, but he could use this passage to directly move between the 2 realms. It was no different from the void breaching pearl. More importantly, after he built these pagodas, he felt that his cultivation level had increased. Unknowingly, it had increased by a lot. The wheel pagoda absorbed the energy of souls around it and nourished the pagoda. It could revive the living beings around the pagoda. He had not used this magical effect because he did not want to interfere with the yin and yang cycle of life and death. This invisible energy of souls would also float to him silently and strengthen his soul. It made his spirit stronger and his energy of souls stronger. As a result, the speed of inner energy transfer increased by half. Moreover, he could directly draw energy from the wheel pagoda when he needed it. He finished building the last stone pagoda and was ready to enter the heavenly demonic realm. Suddenly, his expression changed and he turned to look at the void. "You're here." Sui Miaozhu chuckled and slowly appeared from the void. Chu Li said with a serious expression, "You're here? What a pity." "What's a pity?" Sui Miaozhu scoffed. "You're deliberately mystifying me." She was determined to kill Chu Li, but she did not want to kill him so easily. To her, Chu Li was a special existence. He was the person that she felt the most strongly about. There was nothing more wonderful than killing Chu Li and making him break down bit by bit. Because Chu Li was too strong, she knew that if the goddess had not chosen to save the Azure realm as a ruler of gods, She was indeed inferior to Chu Li and would have been killed by him. However, Chu Li was being manipulated by her now. His life and death were in her hands. It was a wonderful feeling. Chu Li said, "Song Wuji went to the Azure realm to look for you." "Impossible," Sui Miaozhu said. Chapter 23:35. Sui Miaozhu laughed coldly and shook her head. "You want to kill the Divine Lady? What a joke!" Chu Li asked, "Can't the Divine Lady be killed?" "Of course not," Sui Miaozhu said. "The people of this world can't kill the Divine Lady. No matter how strong Song Wuji is, it's useless." Chu Li shook his head. "What about the enlightened master?" "It's useless," Sui Miaozhu scoffed. She was all smiles in front of others, which was completely different from her previous image. She was still as cold as ice in front of Chu Li, especially when she was alone with Chu Li. She was even more unapproachable. Chu Li said, "Song Wuji is the master of the Thunder Pool. He has the Thunder Seal and can kill with the essence of thunder. No one can stop him, not even the Divine Lady." "The Divine Lady can't be killed," Sui Miaozhu said. "Don't worry." Chu Li frowned at her. Sui Miaozhu suddenly chuckled and shook her head. "I can see your admiration for the Divine Lady no matter how slow I am. Thank you for your concern. Are you relieved now?" Chu Li glared at her, knowing that she was purposely trying to anger him. Sui Miaozhu scoffed. "Chu Li, you can't escape today." Chu Li asked, "Do you really want to kill me?" "Yes," Sui Miaozhu said. "Do you still want to live at this point? Then you better be prepared to get hurt. If Song Wuji comes for you now, you won't be able to escape." Chu Li said coldly. "You don't have to worry about that," Sui Miaozhu said coldly. Chu Li said, "That's true. Even if the Divine Lady dies, she will be reborn and won't follow me into the underworld. All right then, Divine Lady, make your move. I will give it my all." "Watch out." Sui Miaozhu clapped her slender palm gracefully. Chu Li dodged but realized that the void-breaching pearl was useless. The void was locked and he could only move away, barely dodging the palm. The slender hand was like a lover's caress, but it was swift and overbearing. Even if he didn't die, he would be heavily injured. Chu Li was shocked. He knew that she found a treasure to counter the void-breaching pearl. Sui Miaozhu laughed. "Chu Li, where can you run to now?" Chu Li asked, "What treasure is this?" "The space-stabilizing pearl," Sui Miaozhu said. "All the treasures in the world have yin and yang. You have the void-breaching pearl, I have the space-stabilizing pearl." "Where did this treasure come from?" Chu Li asked. Sui Miaozhu replied, "Of course it's the deity king's palace. Chu Li, the Azure realm's heritage is much deeper than you think. We have endless treasures, it's impossible for the Grandmasters to defeat us." Chu Li nodded. "That might not be the case." Sui Miaozhu's jade-like palm suddenly sped up, abruptly striking his chest. Unable to dodge in time, a golden palm print suddenly condensed in front of him and blocked Sui Miaozhu's palm. Bam! Like a sudden clap of thunder, Sui Miaozhu's palm broke through the golden palm print and directly hit Chu Li's chest. Chu Li fluttered away like a ragged sack and landed on an ancient tree 100 feet away. He was embedded in the ancient tree and did not move at all. It was as if he had sunk into a swamp and his body was completely immersed in the trunk of the tree. He had already fainted. His eyes were tightly shut and his face looked as if it had been smeared with gold powder. His breathing was heavy and rapid. Sui Miaozhu scoffed and took a step closer to him. She looked up at him and shook her head. "Chu Li, don't play dead. You're not that weak." Chu Li suddenly opened his eyes. Several golden rays descended from the sky and condensed into a golden palm that enveloped Sui Miaozhu. The light-surpassing state martial arts could restrain Azura, and so could the Supreme Titanium Supreme Scripture. He had been looking for a way to restrain Sui Miaozhu, but he had to pay a huge price every time he tried. Sui Miaozhu disappeared in a flash and escaped from the range of the supreme titanium palm. She appeared behind Chu Li and struck the tree with her jade-like palm. The ancient tree that required two people to wrap their arms around could not withstand her palm energy. Chu Li seemed to have predicted her move and left the ancient tree in advance. Boom! With a muffled sound, the towering ancient tree turned into dust and drifted away. Chu Li's expression changed slightly. He had a better understanding of how overbearing her palm energy was. He had neutralized half of the force from the previous palm attack. He had benefited from building the stone tower along the way and had a deeper understanding of the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture. His control of his inner energy had become more precise, which was why he could neutralize half of the palm energy. Otherwise, he would not have been able to stand up after taking a full-force palm attack. Now that he saw the ancient tree turn into dust, he finally understood how powerful Sui Miaozhu's palm energy was. Sui Miaozhu scoffed. Interesting. She did not expect Chu Li to be so difficult to deal with without the void-breaching pearl. It was as if he had a divine plan and could predict her next move. Thus, he could either dodge or prepare in advance, which prevented her from unleashing the full power of her move. This made her extremely annoyed. It was supposed to be a cat toying with a mouse. As a deity king, Chu Li should not be able to resist at all. Because of this, she spent a lot of effort to obtain the sky-fixing pearl. Initially, she could toy with Chu Li to her heart's content before killing him. However, she did not expect that she would not be able to enjoy herself to her heart's content. Chu Li still made her sullen and angry. Chu Li went all out in this desperate situation. He did not have the agility that he had before using the nature restoration manifestation. Coupled with the activation of the flying star technique, the combination of the two made his power even more shocking. Even though Sui Miaozhu was an Azura deity king and her martial arts skills were much higher than his, she was still able to predict his attack in advance and avoid it. However, he also knew that this was not a long-term solution. He could only hold on for a while but not for too long. If he was not careful and took a palm attack, he would lose his life. Even if he did not lose his life, he would definitely die after two palm attacks. Under such circumstances, he trembled with fear and did not dare to be careless. The rapid consumption of his soul energy caused the nature restoration manifestation to improve by leaps and bounds. Its power became stronger and its level became higher. He had used the manifestation of nature restoration before and had tried his best to cultivate it. However, no matter how hard he cultivated, it was not as effective as when he desperately circulated it. Under such circumstances, he was extremely sincere in using the manifestation of nature restoration. In addition, his soul power was endless and he could consume it as much as he wanted. Thus, the manifestation of nature restoration advanced by leaps and bounds, making rapid progress. The nature restoration manifestation was improving by leaps and bounds and its level was getting higher and higher. However, he realized that the nature restoration manifestation no longer consumed his soul energy but his soul energy. Moreover, it consumed a lot of his soul energy. Most importantly, the nature restoration manifestation could not be stopped for even a moment. It needed to be continuously used at all times. Ordinary people who did not have enough soul energy would not be able to cultivate to his current level. Even if they cultivated to this level, they would only be able to use it for a short period of time. They would not be able to squander their soul energy wantonly like him. The Chakram Pagoda transmitted an endless stream of soul energy from the ground. Each stone pagoda was one of the sources of his energy. Moreover, so many stone pagodas were connected to him and sent him the soul energy. Chu Li floated in the air and his body moved strangely. However, he was able to dissipate half of Sui Miaozhu's palm energy at every critical moment. This made her even more furious. Her beautiful face turned cold and her eyes shone with a cold light. The surroundings were like an icehouse and the air seemed to freeze. A smile hung on Chu Li's face as he gradually entered a good state. He did not expect the nature restoration manifestation to suddenly show its power at this time. Initially, it had fallen into his hands, but it was like a pearl covered in dust. He had not been able to unleash its power. Seeing him smile, Sui Miaozhu became even more resentful. She wanted to tear his mouth into pieces and see if he could still smile. Chu Li asked, "Are you still going to fight, ruler of God? You'll definitely die." Sui Miaozhu laughed coldly. "Do you really think you can predict all of my moves?" As she spoke, she took out a dark green pebble from her bosom. Chapter 2336. Chu Li glided backward to put some distance between them. "What is this?" "Destiny Stone." Sui Miaozhu scoffed. "No one will be able to see my every move once I use this stone." Chu Li shook his head. "It's useless." Sui Miaozhu sneered and bit her index finger to smear it on the stone. The dark green stone suddenly flashed a blue light, followed by a red light. Then, the red and blue lights intertwined in the air, and turned into a dark green light that drilled back into the stone. Sui Miaozhu smiled proudly. She glanced at Chu Li and kept the dark green stone. She scoffed. "Let's see how you're going to extrapolate this time. Hand over your life." Then, she flashed in front of Chu Li and pressed her palm lightly. However, she missed. It was just a shadow. Chu Li had already taken a step back and was almost hit. His body technique was not as good as hers, so he must have seen through her plan in advance. Chu Li had already realized that the nature restoration manifestation was not affected at all. He could even sense her every move and predict her move. He was overjoyed. It seemed like the nature restoration manifestation and the flying star technique were different from each other's. They had their own path. Sui Miaozhu gritted her teeth and her moves became faster. Her body turned into a blurry white shadow that shrouded Chu Li. Chu Li dodged left and right. His movements were awkward, but he always managed to avoid her move. The feeling of missing made her even more frustrated. She was so furious that she almost exploded. She could not hold it in anymore and let out a long howl. However, before she howled, Chu Li suddenly tapped his ear a few times and channeled Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. His vision shook violently as if he was attacked, but it disappeared in a moment. He was not affected by the howl. Wherever the howl passed, the leaves crumbled and turned into powder. The trees within 100 meters were bare, as if it was winter. Chu Li's clothes fluttered in the wind to block out the murderous sound. Sui Miaozhu smiled and howled again. Chu Li's feet fluttered as he guided energy from the ground into his ears to block out the howl. Bam 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 bam. Wherever the howl passed, branches crumbled and turned into powder. Chu Li's white robe fluttered as he used a strange step technique as if he was walking in the wind. He was not affected too much. Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture was the best to block this kind of impact. Although the howl was powerful, it was not as powerful as her palm energy. Since it could block the spiritual impact and blood, he was not affected. Ah! Sui Miaozhu howled again. The towering ancient trees within a radius of 10 meters also crumbled, layer by layer beginning to turn into powder and dissipate with the wind. In the end, all of them disappeared from the world. Chu Li dodged abruptly. While she was howling, he took the opportunity to explore her perky chest. Chu Li suddenly and touched his chest. One. Sui Miaozhu was howling with all her might when she thought that Chu Li only had the strength to use his techniques and did not have the strength to fight back. Caught off guard, Chu Li bumped into her chest. He took out something from his inner pocket and quickly distanced himself. The howl and he and she. And he. The howl and went. Sui Miaozhu roared angrily. Her face was flushed and her eyes were burning with anger. She glared at Chu Li, who was 100 feet away. Chu Li, you deserve to die. Asuras had no parents and were born as adults. They did not need to grow up like humans. She was a natural genius in cultivation and had always kept people at a distance. She had never been touched by a male Asura, nor had she been touched by a male heavenly demon or a male celestial being. It was the first time she had been touched by a man. This was a great humiliation to her. She was determined to kill Chu Li. Chu Li smiled and held out his hand. There was a pearl and a stone in his palm. The pearl was the size of a longan. It was yellow and dull, as if it was made of yellow soil. The dark green stone was the destiny stone she used earlier. Chu Li smiled. Thank you, ruler of God. Is this the space-fixing pearl? He picked up the yellow bead and examined it with rapt attention. Suddenly, a faint soul energy appeared. It seemed like Sui Miaozhu's beautiful figure appeared. Chu Li activated the God-punishing thunder sword. A loud bang came from the pearl. Sui Miaozhu stopped and her face turned cold. She sensed that the space-fixing pearl was about to leave her. She pounced on it. Chu Li had expected this. He swung the God-punishing thunder sword several times. His soul energy had increased. The God-punishing thunder sword was more powerful. After 10 God-punishing thunder swords, the soul energy in the space-fixing pearl disappeared. He quickly imprinted his soul energy into it. The void around him seemed to be under his control. He had mastered the earth. Now that he had mastered the void, he sped up. When Sui Miaozhu got close to him, she felt a strong resistance. The feeling of controlling heaven and earth disappeared. It was like she was an honorable lord. She did not have the power of an Asura deity king. Her face changed. She stared at Chu Li. Chu Li laughed. Thank you, ruler of God. What a great space-fixing pearl. This kind of treasure was truly miraculous. More importantly, the power of his soul was tyrannical. Moreover, the spatial fixation pearl was different from the void-breaching pearl. They were treasures of 2 different levels, and the spatial fixation pearl was far superior to the void-breaching pearl. The void-breaking pearl could only break the void. It was already an amazing treasure. However, the space-fixing pearl could lock and control the void. Destruction and control were on different levels. Destruction was easier. The void-breaking pearl was a top-notch treasure. The space-fixing pearl was a divine item. With the space-fixing pearl, Chu Li was no different from before. However, with the space-fixing pearl, he was on another level. He could control the earth and the void. The combination of the two was the power of an Asura deity king. It was like he had transformed into an Asura deity king. Sui Miaozhu's face turned cold. The space-fixing pearl was not the void-breaking pearl. It was a unique divine item. If she lost it in her hands, she would be a sinner in the Asura boundary. Her determination to kill Chu Li became stronger. Under the boiling killing intent, her blood flowed faster. The power of the Asura power technique became stronger. A faint red mist rose from her body. It was faintly discernible and slowly dispersed. Chu Li frowned. He took a few steps back. He felt cold all over when he felt the killing intent. He was extremely afraid of the red mist. His instincts told him that he would lose his life if he came into contact with it. Sui Miaozhu did not move. She stared at him. Her eyes were getting brighter. The red mist was still spreading. From 1 meter to 2 meters, it continued to spread to 10 meters. Chu Li was 20 meters away from her, but he still felt the danger. He wanted to run for his life. Humph! Sui Miaozhu scoffed. She flashed. Chu Li disappeared. Sui Miaozhu stopped. She looked around. Her eyes were getting brighter. She said slowly, Chu Li, you can run but you can't. I'll destroy Taihao Peak first. Chu Li's voice came from afar. Let's see if your Asura boundary has been destroyed first. Humph! Sui Miaozhu's body flashed. The red mist followed. It slowly shrunk back into her body. She finally appeared in front of a stone tower. She stared at the stone tower. The red mist spread again. The red mist slowly wrapped around the stone tower. After a while, the red mist shrunk. The stone tower looked like it had experienced thousands of years. With a flick of her sleeve, the stone pagoda immediately turned into powder and scattered away. Chapter 23:37. Chu Li built many pagodas along the way. The more pagodas there were and the more connected they became, the stronger the protection of the pagodas. As the Azura deity king, Sui Miaozhu's power was even stronger. Formations were useless in front of her. She was the one who ruled over the world, so formations were nothing more than a small trick in front of her. Wherever the red mist passed, the protection of the stone pagodas was constantly worn down. When it was almost worn down, she gently slammed the stone pagodas down. She vented all her anger on the stone pagodas. She knew that these stone pagodas were one of the sources of Chu Li's power. As long as they were destroyed, Chu Li's power would not be as strong and his ability to escape would not be as good. The range of Chu Li's omniscient mirror had unknowingly expanded to 300 miles. It was a terrifying distance. However, for a master like Sui Miaozhu, it was just a moment. Seeing that Sui Miaozhu was destroying her own chakram pagoda, Chu Li began to build another one. He was now extremely proficient in building the pagoda. He was multitasking as he used his 9 swords to cut different rock. Then, he carved different markings on both of his hands. The sword light was like lightning, and in an instant, a square stone of the exact same size appeared. His hands formed 2 blurry shadows, and the complex markings were completed in an instant. In the time it took for Sui Miaozhu to destroy a pagoda, he could build another one. Therefore, the power of these stone pagodas did not increase or decrease. If he could be faster than Sui Miaozhu's speed of destruction, the defensive power of these chakram pagoda would increase, and it would be harder to destroy. After destroying 10 chakram pagoda in one go, Sui Miaozhu's anger was almost vented and she stopped. Chu Li's voice was heard from afar. "Deity King, let's meet in the Azura realm." With the sky determining pearl, he was not that afraid of Sui Miaozhu. However, he knew that he could not do anything to her. He could only escape but not fight back. His cultivation level was still far from hers. If he wanted to kill Sui Miaozhu or suppress her, the only way was to cultivate with all his might. Fortunately, he only needed a month to reach the 8th level of the Heavenly Spirit Scripture with the help of the 9-colored fruit. By then, he would be able to deter Sui Miaozhu and be truly safe. Otherwise, he would have to avoid Sui Miaozhu. Who knew what other treasures and skills she had? Sui Miaozhu frowned and stopped. She pondered for a while before heading towards the Azura realm. Initially, she was not worried about the Azura realm. However, things were different now that Chu Li had the sky anchoring orb. Moreover, Song Wuji was going to challenge the Azura realm. If she was not there, the Divine Lady might really suffer a great loss. As Chu Li watched her leave, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, he hid in a rotary pagoda and pondered. He was carefully observing the nature restoration manifestation. Ever since he had learned the manifestation of nature restoration, he had not paid much attention to it. He had only practiced it out of convenience and did not have a deep understanding of it. He had made some progress the last time, but he had subconsciously cast it aside. This time, when he was in dire straits, he did not expect that the one to save him would be the manifestation of nature restoration. Furthermore, under the assistance of the wheel pagoda, he was able to push it to an extremely high level. He already felt that his manifestation of nature restoration had reached the greater mastery stage, and it would be difficult for him to advance any further. This was already ingenious enough for him to have the ability to protect himself in front of Sui Miaozhu. Of course, this time it was a surprise. If Sui Miaozhu was prepared next time, he might not be able to keep his life. The Azura realm had a deep foundation and endless treasures. They even had a divine item like the sky anchoring pearl. What else did they not have? He glided into the heavenly demonic realm and wanted to find a way to deal with Azura. The heavenly demonic power could restrain the Azura power technique. If he could improve the cloud slashing power or the heavenly demonic scripture to another level, he might be able to restrain the Azura power technique. In that case, he would not have to reveal the heavenly spirit scripture anymore. The heavenly spirit scripture was feared by heaven and earth. Usually, he would use the life and death scripture to hide it. This was his wishful thinking. Great Dreams sect in the sect leader's basilica, Qing Yuan, who was dressed in a yellow robe, was sitting in an armchair and sizing up Chu Li. Chu Li had already transformed into Wu Yuanxi. He gave a fist salute and smiled. Sect leader, I'm here to ask for your guidance. Qing Yuan shook his head and smiled. You took advantage of me the last time. I should be the one asking for your guidance. You're amazing. You're truly a new generation replacing the old. Chu Li replied, You flatter me, sect leader. He knew that Qing Yuan was talking about the divine demon herb. Qing Yuan sighed. The divine demon herb really lives up to its name. Your cultivation level has indeed improved rapidly. He was a little puzzled and looked at Chu Li from head to toe. Although the divine demon herb was amazing, it was not something that could be achieved in one go. It needed to be released bit by bit and cleansed bit by bit. It should not have improved so rapidly. Chu Li said, I've been enlightened recently. Tell me, what's the matter? Qing Yuan asked. He had a whole new level of respect for Chu Li. After obtaining the divine demon herb, he took the opportunity to improve bravely and did not slack off. Such a temperament was indeed extraordinary. In the future, he could be an indomitable big shot in the heavenly demonic realm. It was a good thing to have a good relationship with him. Chu Li said, Sect leader, you know the Azura deity king, right? The new Azura deity king? Sui Miaozhu. Qing Yuan nodded. What about her? Chu Li sighed. I have a death grudge against her. She'll definitely kill me. The Azura deity king usually doesn't leave the Azura realm and enter the foreign battlefield. Qing Yuan shook his head. As long as you don't barge into the Azura realm, you'll be fine. There's no need to worry. As he spoke, he focused on using the divination heavenly prophecy technique. However, he was confused and could not deduce anything. This was not surprising. Since Chu Li was able to obtain the divine demon herb, he was naturally proficient in divination. Moreover, his realm was extremely high. He could confuse and conceal the heavenly prophecy. Chu Li shook his head. She even barged into the Taihao peak of the beyond heavenly realm to hunt Chu Li down. With her personality, she'll hunt me down too. After Chu Li, it'll be me. Would she dare to barge into the heavenly demonic realm? Qing Yuan was silent. The Azura deity king barging into the beyond heavenly realm broke the rules and the unspoken rules. Since she could barge into the beyond heavenly realm, she could naturally barge into the heavenly demonic realm. Chu Li said, Our heavenly demonic power restrains the Azura power technique. Sect leader, can you defeat the Azura deity king? It's hard to say without fighting. Qing Yuan shook his head. Chu Li sighed. I'm afraid I can't even take one hit. Sect leader, do you have a way to save me? Your current cultivation level is already extremely high. Qing Yuan frowned as he sized him up and sighed. But, Chu Li said, I know, the enlightened god's descent technique. Qing Yuan nodded. That's right. Once she casts this technique, you'll definitely die. If you want to save your life, the only way is to cultivate the heavenly demonic descent technique. Chu Li smiled bitterly. Qing Yuan said, Those who aren't sect leaders can't cast it. Moreover, the only ones who can cast the heavenly demonic descent technique are the sect leaders of the 12 sects. The other sects can't, but the sect leader of the Flying Heaven sect can cast it. Chu Li shook his head. I can't stay in the sect and rely on the sect leader's protection. Qing Yuan said, then there's only one way. Chu Li's spirit was lifted. Qing Yuan said, the heavenly demonic blade. Chu Li was surprised. Qing Yuan sighed. I've heard of a legend. There's a heavenly demonic blade in the heavenly demonic realm. It's left behind by the heavenly demon of the previous level. It contains a strange spirit. Once you obtain this blade, you'll be able to connect with the heavenly demon of the previous level and borrow the power of the heavenly demon. It's similar to the heavenly demonic descent technique. Sect leader, do you know where the heavenly demonic blade is? Chu Li asked. Chapter 2338. Heavenly Demonic Blade. Chu Li muttered. He tried to recall in his mind to see if there was any information about this blade. In the end, he had never heard of this heavenly demonic blade. I'm afraid it's not easy for you to obtain this, Qing Yuan said. With such a treasure, the moment it is used, it will reveal its whereabouts. However, it has not appeared in all these years, so there is no trace of it. Who was the previous owner of the heavenly demonic blade? Chu Li asked. Qing Yuan said, that was 1,000 years ago. Huhaya was the owner of the Sky Devil Saber. Later on, this Huhaya disappeared without a trace. Since then, the Sky Devil Saber's whereabouts are unknown. It might have followed Huhaya and gone into seclusion, buried in a place where no one is. Chu Li said, there are no clues about Huhaya at all? He did not believe that Qing Yuan would not track Huhaya. This kind of mystical item must be within the range of the Great Dream Sect. With the Great Dream Sect's methods, they must be able to find some clues, even if it was 1,000 years later. Qing Yuan smiled. There are some clues. I found his cave residence, but unfortunately, there were only some traces of his life. After that, I couldn't find it anymore. It seems like he completely disappeared from the world. It's more likely that he used the heavenly demonic blade to ascend to the first heaven. That's even more impossible to find. Chu Li slowly nodded. Qing Yuan said, this matter has been buried in my heart. Now that you mentioned it, I remembered it. This is also a rare treasure that the sect can't track down. Chu Li sighed. If the Great Dream Sect can't, I can't either. The power of the Great Dream Sect was beyond imagination. It was not only because of their extraordinary deduction ability, but also because of their omnipresent tentacles. Qing Yuan must have many chess pieces in the heavenly demonic realm that were not usually revealed and only used at critical times. Qing Yuan smiled. That might not be the case. Chu Li, your ability is stronger than the Great Dream Sect. Chu Li shook his head. The last time was just a coincidence. Sect leader, you think too highly of me. Haha, others are afraid of others looking down on them, but you're the opposite. Qing Yuan shook his head and smiled. I can tell you about Huhaya's cave residence. Go check it out. I couldn't find anything and could only give it up. Your luck has always been excellent. You can give it a try. Thank you, sect leader. Chu Li fist saluted. Qing Yuan called someone over and gave a few instructions. After a while, a green-clothed disciple presented a dossier and left respectfully. Qing Yuan handed the dossier to Chu Li and smiled. Take a look. Chu Li did not hold back anymore. He opened the book and quickly flipped through it, imprinting it into his mind. In just a short while, he had flipped through all 12 pages and nodded in satisfaction. It didn't just contain Huhaya's cave abode, but also his life and the martial arts he cultivated. It was as detailed as possible. Seeing this, Huhaya's image had already been established in his mind. This was a proud and aloof man, a genius in martial arts. He came from an unknown small sect, but he had cultivated the sect's martial arts to perfection, and he had even surpassed his master. Relying on the demonic saber, he ran amok for a period of time and killed countless evildoers. Later, He implicated his own woman and died. Finally, he retreated into the deep mountains and never appeared again. Some said that he committed suicide for his woman, some said that he went astray during his cultivation and died from the backlash of the demonic saber. The Great Dream sect wanted to obtain the demonic saber, but unfortunately, extrapolation was ineffective on him. Because of the demonic saber, they could only rely on the disciples of the Great Dream sect to investigate bit by bit. In the end, they found his cave abode, but it was a cave that he had used in the past. His last traces could not be traced. Chuli put down the dossier and sighed. He felt sorry for Huhaya, but at the same time, he was vigilant. If he did not take good care of the women around him, the consequences would be too tragic. Qing Yuan looked at him with a smile. Chuli returned the dossier and fist saluted. "Thank you, sect leader." Qing Yuan waved his hand. Chuli got up and smiled. "Then I'll go take a look." Go. With your luck, you'll definitely have a chance," Qing Yuan said with a smile. Chuli smiled and got up to leave. He used the omniscient mirror and did not find anyone following him. He shook his head. This sect leader Qing could not be underestimated. He had many tricks up his sleeve. 5 days later, he entered a vast mountain range. It was like entering 100,000 mountains. The towering peaks stood in great numbers, and there were almost no signs of human habitation. Even those with profound martial arts skills were not suitable to live here. It was too dangerous. Not only did they have to guard against the ferocious beasts, but they also had to guard against the ubiquitous poisonous insects unless they had cultivated to the state of poison immunity. Even so, these poisonous insects were often extraordinary. They might not be able to block these poisons. Chu Li's divine protective technique was tyrannical, and nothing could get close. He walked on the treetops. Even so, poisonous insects in the air approached him from time to time. The ferocious birds in the sky had amazing intuition. They could sense that he was not to be trifled with, so they stayed far away. The flying insects were not so intelligent. They kept attacking him, but they were killed by his protective energy. After another half a day, he came to a towering peak. This peak was a bit higher than the peaks next to it. It was unique and could be seen from afar. When he came to the mountainside, he groped his way to a cave. Chuli sighed and looked at the cave that did not have any traps. It was refreshing and spotless. There was also a formation running, which was why it was so clean. He used the omniscient mirror and retracted it from afar. He began to focus on the cave and observed it bit by bit. His eyes could see through the stone walls, and he could see the situation of the entire peak. He moved forward bit by bit and then spread out. He saw a stone room, and then another stone room behind the stone wall. These 2 stone chambers had been cleaned by someone, and every inch of the place had been carefully searched to see if there were any traps or secret rooms. Chuli shook his head. This was obviously the work of the Great Dream sect. They must have searched carefully and repeatedly. Unfortunately, they did not have a mysterious skill like the omniscient mirror, so they could not see through this towering peak. 100 meters above the peak there was another cave. The entrance of the cave had disappeared. It was obvious that the terrain had moved, and the entrance of the cave was unknowingly buried. No matter how powerful one was, one would not be able to find this cave. This was the power of nature. The cave led to a stone room. Looking up, it was in line with the peak of the mountain. There was a small pond of strange water in the middle of the room. It was green and clear, like a piece of jasper. There was a stalactite in the stone room, and there was a drop of green water hanging upside down. The water droplet seemed to be leaving the stalactite and falling into the small pond below. The diameter of the pond was about 3 meters, and it looked like it was solidified. Chuli felt a strong spiritual energy. This pond of green water was not ordinary. It must be some kind of natural treasure that could increase one's power and cleanse one's body. A middle-aged man sat beside the pond. He was motionless, like an old monk in meditation. He looked like a living person, but there was no sign of life. He was completely dead. Chuli guessed that this was Huhaya. Moreover, there was a gray long knife on the middle-aged man's lap. It was simple and unsophisticated, and there was nothing special about it. It was no different from an ordinary long knife. Chapter 2339. Chuli stood in the cave and paced around with his hands behind his back as he pondered. Logically speaking, the middle-aged man should have a treasure blade on his knees, or he would not have treasured it so much. If this middle-aged man was the Huhaya that he was looking for, then it should be the heavenly demon blade. Of course, it was also possible that it was not Huhaya. This mountain was too majestic, much more majestic than the mountains of the Flying Heaven School, the Great Dream School, and the Dancing Butterfly School. In fact, only the three mountains combined could compare to this mountain. Therefore, the Great Dream sect could not find the cave because this mountain was too big. It was too much of a coincidence for two people to live in seclusion on a mountain. However, the wonders of the world were often unexpected. It was not impossible for such coincidences to happen. They might even know each other or have a close relationship. He smiled and shook his head. His mood was inexplicably relaxed and happy. He felt that his luck was really good. The heavens really did not give up on him. When he needed the Sky Demon Blade, he immediately found the Sky Demon Blade. He had nothing to say about his luck and could only feel grateful. He suddenly flashed and appeared in the cave, ignoring the mountain rocks. Standing beside the jade-green pool, Chuli carefully looked at it and took a light breath. It was full of spiritual energy. The pores on his body opened up and greedily absorbed the refreshing and fragrant spiritual energy. It was like a person who had been drinking water touched sweet fruit juice and could not resist it. He was not in a hurry to take this strange item. Instead, he turned to the middle-aged man who was sitting beside the pool. The middle-aged man sat still, his body shrouded in a strange aura. Chuli felt a sense of danger the moment he got close to him. The aura around the middle-aged man was stern and cold, as if he had merged with the heavens and earth. Touching him was akin to going against the heavens and earth. Chuli frowned. The middle-aged man's aura was so strong, but it covered an extremely narrow area. He did not notice it when he used the omniscient mirror from afar, and only felt the danger when he got closer. This way, others would not be able to detect him through this sense of danger. Such a powerful protective force was left behind by the middle-aged man after his death. It was like the remains of an enlightened master. He inexplicably thought of ascension. This middle-aged man did not have anything else on him. He did not have any treasures on him. The aura came from his body and was connected to heaven and earth. It was obvious that he had ascended and left behind his remains. He was even more convinced that this was Huhaya. It was no wonder that no news about Huhaya had spread. It turned out that he had already ascended. Chuli shook his head and sighed, feeling even more impressed. If it was a disciple of a top-notch sect like the Taihao Peak or the Great Dream sect, it would be admirable, but it would not be that rare. However, Huhaya was different. He came from such a weak sect, yet he was able to ascend through luck and wisdom. He didn't dare to get any closer. After thinking for a while, he suddenly flicked his finger, and the meteor finger shot towards that long saber. Bang! An invisible force appeared out of thin air, and he crashed straight into the wall behind him, embedding a foot into it. His entire body was in excruciating pain, as if he had been run over by a millstone. There was not a single part of his body that wasn't in pain, and his internal organs were vaguely injured. Fortunately, there was the lake of jade not far away from him, and the spiritual energy was oppressive. He manipulated the spiritual energy to enter his body, and his body instantly felt lighter. His injuries were almost completely healed in an instant. It was really strange. He grew to like this pool of jade water more and more. His courage grew as he looked at the long saber again. Huhaya's protective energy barrier was strange. It was as if it had its own intelligence. It could locate Chu Li's finger energy and attack him from there. Chu Li was already on guard against it, yet Huhaya still managed to hit him. The long saber was only a few meters away from him, but he couldn't get it. Chu Li's mind raced. He had to first get rid of the protective energy barrier to get the long saber. If he couldn't get rid of the protective energy barrier, it would be impossible for him to take advantage of the situation. He tried a few more methods. He threw a pebble, but it turned into powder. He threw a flying blade, but it was immediately deflected. He took a long stick and slowly approached it. The wooden stick shattered, and a strong force even traveled along the stick to him. Fortunately, he let go in time. He then tried to lift a huge rock and throw it at the man. Bang! The huge rock scattered in all directions, but the middle-aged man still stood firm. Chu Li frowned as he thought about it. He suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was holding 2 black hammers in his hands. These 2 hammers were forged from meteorites, and they were unusually heavy. Even a normal martial arts master would not be able to lift them. Chu Li took a deep breath and threw the 2 meteorite hammers. They turned into 2 gusts of wind and whistled through the air. However, they did not hit Huhaya, but brushed past his body, missing him by a few millimeters. He respected Huhaya very much, and did not want to destroy his shell. He only wanted to take the heavenly demonic blade. Amidst the whistling sound, the meteor point energy shot toward the long saber from another direction. Bang bang! 2 muffled sounds were heard, and the 2 meteorite hammers bounced back and shot toward Chu Li. Chu Li had already predicted this, so he moved his body lightly to avoid it. However, he realized that the 2 meteorite hammers had also changed direction and were chasing after him. Bang bang! Chu Li's 2 punches sent the meteorite hammers flying, but he was also sent flying. The meteor point energy had already hit the long saber, but it disappeared without a sound. The protective energy barrier was too strong, and under such circumstances, he could not break through it, so he could not take out the long saber. After he was hit by the meteorite hammers, his internal organs were heavily injured again, and this time, it was much worse than the previous time. The spiritual energy from the Emerald Pond surged, and he quickly recovered from his injuries. Chu Li frowned and suddenly looked outside the cave. The 2 elders gently approached him, and came to the cave that he had arrived at before. They looked left and right and carefully searched, but did not find any signs of Chu Li searching. The 2 looked at each other and guessed that Chu Li had not found this place. Thus, the 2 of them hid on the other peak and looked over here. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. This Qing Yuan, as a sect leader, did not have the demeanor of a sect leader. He must have wanted to take advantage of the situation. Even if he did not want to take advantage of the situation, he still wanted to know the news. It could be said that this was the usual method of the Great Dream sect. These 2 people were a little troublesome. Although they could not find him, if he caused too much of a commotion, he would definitely find out. The 2 elders' cultivation levels were very shocking, and they were definitely not ordinary masters. It was obvious that ordinary masters would not be able to follow him. He turned his head and looked at Huhaya, who was sitting cross-legged, and frowned. His mind turned quickly, and he continued to search for a solution. The flying star technique began to derive, but unfortunately, it was a mess. He could not derive a single trace of Huhaya in front of him. His body was connected to heaven and earth, and it directly covered the mysteries of heaven, so he could not derive anything. After a while, he reached out his hand and slowly approached, and then felt a faint power. Before he could completely touch it, he felt an infinite power surging, like a river flowing backwards. Bam! With a muffled sound, he flew backward again. He kept changing the force in the air. Even if he was injured, he could not hit the stone wall. Although the cave was in the middle of the mountain, and even if there was a sound, it would be difficult for it to travel out, he had no other choice. Pfft! He spat out a mouthful of blood in the air, and fell limply to the ground. Then, the spiritual energy of the jade pool surged, and his body was repaired. He let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was no loud sound. Standing in front of Huhaya with a frown, Chu Li felt like he had exhausted all his tricks, and did not know where to start. Huhaya's vital energy barrier was too powerful, and neither hard nor soft tactics could work. A thought flashed in his mind, and he suddenly took out the sky-setting orb, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Chapter 2340. With the space fixation pearl, he could control the void and cut off Huhaya's connection with the upper heaven. This would destroy the state of the integration of heaven and man, and Huhaya would lose his source of power. After all, he was already a cadaver and not a real living person, so he could not use his technique. The power of the vital energy barrier came from the upper heaven, which was the power of heaven and earth. That was why he could not break it no matter how hard he tried, because it was a higher level of power. He also had the spiritual energy of the upper heaven, and the inner energy that was condensed was pure and powerful, but it was still inferior to Huhaya's vital energy barrier. Perhaps the upper heaven was like the Grandmaster's boundary, which was also divided into levels. His spiritual energy of the upper heaven was of a lower level, but Huhaya's vital energy barrier was of a higher level. His thoughts were as fast as lightning. It seemed like he had a lot of thoughts, but in a flash, he activated the space fixation pearl. The space fixation pearl was connected to his mind, and his mind turned to the void. He began to control the void, and the void above his head was easily controlled. It slowly moved and began to explore the void above Huhaya's head. After connecting with the space fixation pearl, the void seemed to open up, and he could observe and control it. It was as if he had opened up another world, a world that was different from the eyes of ordinary people. The void above Huhaya's head was a circle with a diameter of 3 meters, and it completely enveloped him. A solid aura descended from the void, and it did not look like spiritual energy, but more like a pillar made of gold. The spiritual energy flashed with golden light, and it was so strong that it felt like he could touch it with his hand. Chu Li suddenly frowned. He could not control the circle with a diameter of 3 meters. The void above Huhaya seemed to be frozen, and no matter how he tried, it did not move, like a reef in a storm. Chu Li's face turned gloomy. He had been happy for nothing. He tried for a long time, but it was useless. Huhaya's void was not something he could move at all. This was the power of an ascender, and it was even more powerful than an Azura deity king. It was not something he could fight. He sighed and put away the space fixation pearl. He stared at Huhaya for a long time, and finally shook his head. He tried using the heavenly demonic spirit devouring technique, and in the end, he spat out blood. The heavenly demonic scripture could not withstand this power, and it could not be converted because it was too pure. He even tried the god-killing thunder sword. It silently merged into his protective upstanding chi, and nothing happened. He sat 10 feet away from Huhaya and frowned as he pondered. He tried to find an opportunity in an impossible situation, but in the end, he couldn't find a way to restrain it. There really were things that made people despair in this world. He heaved a long sigh of relief, shook his head, and decided to change his train of thought. It was rare to find such a powerful shield of vigor chi, and it was also rare to find an expert. He wanted to improve himself, and using this shield of vigor chi as an enemy was the best way to improve his cultivation. At his current level, there were few opponents in the world, and it was difficult to find an opponent who was on par with him to spar with. Sparring with an evenly matched opponent was the best way to improve. At his level of cultivation, he was usually in a high position, so he didn't have the time nor the misgivings to spar freely. Since he was cultivating alone, his progress wasn't that fast. Now was a rare opportunity for him to do so. Thus, he gathered his energy and started to activate the Azura palm. Bang! He flew backward and spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. Then, the spiritual chi in the lake of jade surged and healed his internal organs, but this time, the recoil was really strong. He found that this shield of vigor chi seemed to be hostile to the Azura power technique. It was especially fierce and overbearing, but it wasn't the same for other inner forces. Thus, he continued to use the Azura power technique to deal with it. Bang, 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 bang. He was sent flying again and again. In order to not be noticed by the two elders of the Great Dream sect outside, he used all his strength to operate the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture, dispelling the force and not crashing into the stone wall. He flew out again and spat out blood again and again. Unknowingly, his inner force also became purer and slightly increased. With his comprehension, every time he was injured, even if his inner force didn't increase by much, it would still increase. Bit by bit, he became stronger and stronger, and he was so addicted to it that he couldn't free himself. He found that it wasn't just his inner force that grew, but his body as well. The water of the Lake of Jade was very magical. After washing his body again and again, it would strengthen his body a little. Although it was far from the divine demon herb, with the accumulation, it was not weak, and he had improved a lot. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. His cultivation level had increased by a level. Other than the Azura power technique, all his other martial arts had improved. He kept changing his heart technique to fight against Huhaya's shield of vigor chi. Huhaya's shield of vigor chi was like a hammer, and under the constant hammering, his inner force became purer and purer. In the evening, 10 elders in green clothes fluttered to the peak where he was. The 2 elders who were originally on another peak hurried over and met up with the 10 elders in green clothes. "Junior brother Jing, how are you doing? Is there any trace of Chuli?" asked the gray-haired elder among the 10 elders. An elder who was as slender as a bamboo shook his head and sighed. "I haven't seen Chuli. He didn't come at all, or he left one step ahead of us and never came back." "He was here?" The gray-haired elder frowned. The bamboo-like elder sighed. "But there were no signs of him in the cave. It's more like he never came." "That's not right." The gray-haired elder shook his head. "After he left the Great Dream faction, we didn't see him again. He didn't go anywhere. Why didn't he come here after entering this mountain range? Has he not found him yet?" "That's impossible." The bamboo-like elder laughed. "He is a smart man. How could he not find him?" "That's strange." The gray-haired elder frowned and looked confused. "Even if he didn't believe our news, he should have come to take a look. Let's wait and see. Maybe he was delayed by something else. He is very lucky. Could it be that he had some other adventure?" The bamboo-like elder laughed. "This mountain range is so deep and wide. It wouldn't be rare to find any treasures or exotic minerals. He might be tied up and unwilling to come here." "That's very possible." The gray-haired elder laughed. They continued to talk about how to get an adventure. What adventure could suddenly increase one's cultivation level or obtain an antique study? The Great Dream faction had many antique studies. They did not need to be greedy for anything else. Exotic minerals were what they were after. No matter how good a martial art was, without enough cultivation level, it was just for show. Chuli stopped and shook his head with a frown. This time, the Great Dream faction had learned their lesson from last time. They sent so many people to follow him. They wanted to take advantage of him. How despicable. He wanted to knock them out and throw them to Qing Yuan. He wanted to see how Qing Yuan would react. However, it was just a thought. Qing Yuan's grasp of the situation was extremely precise. This place was provided by Qing Yuan. If not for Qing Yuan, he probably wouldn't have been able to obtain this fortuitous encounter. Therefore, even if Qing Yuan used some tricks, he could only laugh it off and not let him succeed. Chu Li needed to be more careful not to make any sound. Even when he was fighting with Hu Hai's shield of vigor, his forces did not make any sound. When the palm energy and the shield of vigor collided, it was silent but more dangerous. Under such circumstances, he squeezed out more of his potential and advanced faster. His palms and moves were silent, and he was more sinister than before. Another 10 days had passed. One morning, he suddenly opened his eyes and could not help but open his mouth. A long roar sounded like a dragon's roar. It lasted for a long time and resounded throughout the world. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.